Alrighty, welcome back to Shut Up and Ball. I am Aaron Chow, accompanied as always by my co-host John Harris, and we're back sharing our thoughts, reactions, whatnot to Week 7 of the 2024-2025 NFL season, and of course, as always, going over all of the games, and some probably gonna take longer than others. But anyhow, right before we do, just to update you all on last week. It was done. Needless to say, it was your week, John, as you went 11-4 against the spread record wise. I went 6-9. You won there, and you're almost at 500. You're literally one game off at this point. And then money wise too. Not only that, caught up there. Not only did you catch up, now you've taken the lead as you were plus 900. So positive. I know that's been a rarity for either one of us, especially in that discrepancy, but plus 900 on your bets. So well done to you. Indianapolis, big 500 came through there, and litany of others. And then for me, net minus 200. So I'm at overall, you're at plus 120. So once again, in the greens, at least there. And I'm at minus 450 after week 7. So a little bit of ground to make, and for me at least, in both record and money. But yeah, looking good for you in going into week 8. But regardless, there's that. To talk about the games, of course, gonna start with Thursday night. This one was kind of a doozy, as the Denver Broncos, this was really kind of a one-way show. They beat the Saints 33-10 in the return of Sean Payton. I also did not know that they were honoring Drew Brees that night. A little bit ironic. I guess they wanted Sean there. But anyway, Payton kicked the Saints' butts. No surprise, as Spencer Rattler was out there for the Saints. But what are your thoughts here, John, in regards to the Thursday night game?
For the Saints, I mean, obviously they're down significant weapons. You don't have Olave, you don't have Rashid Shaheed, Derek Carr is injured, so I'm not surprised their offense performed the way they did. Denver's defense has really been really strong throughout the year, and you've got a rookie quarterback out there. You've got your top 2 receivers out, and the guys replacing them. You got Cedric Wilson, who's a veteran, but after that, like Mason Tipton, Bub Means, these guys are rookies. So it's like, how much do you really expect when you've got a rookie quarterback and 2 of your top 3 receivers are also rookies? So I didn't expect much there, and I did think that this game probably becomes one-dimensional. Denver focuses on stopping Alvin Kamara. That did happen. I don't know if you saw, but the report is apparently he's been playing with a broken hand.
Yeah,
which that probably sucks, but
yep.
So, I mean, there's that. He didn't run really great in this one. Just overall, offensively, New Orleans couldn't do anything. They really couldn't do anything. And then on the other side, Denver, I'm happy that this game happened, because I'm wondering if this can bode well for the future of the Broncos. We saw the first few weeks, the concerns we had was Bo Nix is throwing 30 to 40 times a game. He's still a rookie, so and quite frankly, they don't have the greatest of weapons in that receiver and tight end room, and the offensive line, is kind of banged up as well. So it felt like this isn't a situation where we want to be passing the ball this many times. And they have an interesting running back room with Javonte Williams, Jaleel McLaughlin, Audric Esteem. You've got some options there, right? And so we thought maybe this would be a run-first team. You play some defense. Well, unfortunately, the first few weeks, they couldn't run the ball at all. Now, all of a sudden, they've started to get the run game going. Javonte Williams had a good game last week. Now, this week, he pops off 14 carries, 88 yards, 2 touchdowns, and it wasn't like he had like one long run, because honestly, throughout the day, it genuinely felt like the moment that game started and they were handing Javonte the ball, which I think didn't start till the second drive, because I believe the first drive was 3 straight passes and a 3-and-out. But the second drive, they started handing Javonte the ball, and all of a sudden it felt like he was getting 6 yards a carry every time, just eating up yards. And he had a hell of a game, 2 touchdowns. Jaleel McLaughlin also had a great game, 4 for 35. Audric Esteem had 5 for 29. So they could run the ball however they wanted. They ran for 225 yards. Bo Nix chipped in 75 himself. Obviously credit to the Broncos. They, had a great run game, and I hope they continue to do so moving forward, because it really feels like if they can get Javonte going, and he looks explosive as he did on this past Thursday night, then it's only going to be up from here for Denver, considering the way their defense is playing as well. That said, The New Orleans Saints are starting to have a problem here because they started off 2-0. We talked about how they've started to look like frauds. Their defense can't stop anybody when it comes to the run game. This is not unique. Javonte and the 225 yards that the Broncos had. We just saw Sean Tucker and Bucky Irving both go for over 100 the week prior for Tampa Bay. That's not even with Rachaad White, who's considered the starter. I know it's obviously kind of running back by committee, but Sean Tucker hadn't done anything on the year yet. He gets thrust into action because of Rachaad White being out, and he goes for over 100. So, like, the fact that the Saints can't stop anybody in the run game is starting to become a known thing, that if the Denver Broncos, who seemingly can't run on anybody throughout the year, all of a sudden are able to get any of their running backs all on uber efficient days, New Orleans has some very scary problems that are not even related to the offensive side where they have all the injuries. So,
yeah, I'm not going to mention much else on the Saints. I think, like you alluded to, I'll mention this in regards to, at least you mentioned all the injuries, and like no shock when you throw out a rookie quarterback, especially, I forget what round Spencer went, but day 3 guy. We knew he was already be a bit raw, and you mentioned during the week you lose Olave and Rashid Shaheed, and then they already were losing one of their interior linemen, which so all the cracks and worries that we had coming before the year, I feel like it's kind of pushed off. The first 2 weeks were wasn't really relevant, but now it is. Obviously, we mentioned before the season, depth was going to be an issue, and like you kind of alluded to, it's possibly the defense. We're starting to see that on both sides of the ball, but in regards to that, they don't have much kind of strapped for cash, so a lot of focusing on internal building there. And then especially like you said, against very good Broncos defense that has been very quietly I wouldn't be shocked if they were a top 5 rated in most things, but I would honestly put them in a top 10. I'm not even looking at the numbers, but we just when you think about their body of work for most of the season, like you said earlier in the year, they did a lot of the heavy lifting while the offense is finding their way. And obviously in this game, like you said, it's great that the run game has got going. Hopefully continue to do so, as we're both Javonte stockholders and supporters there. And more importantly too, though, I guess for the Broncos at least, Bo Nix too, very, very clean game. Like, I know he didn't throw for any touchdowns and receptions, but like you mentioned, efficient, and especially without Courtland Sutton. Was Sutton injured, or did he just like not get targeted at all? Because he's not on the box score, and I'm not.
He did not get targeted at all. He was not injured.
Yeah, I mean, take that for what you will. Nonetheless, they still win pretty convincingly. So that's you take those, and maybe maybe Troy Franklin might become a thing. Who knows? We also thought Marvin Mims would be a thing. It's weird, but whatever it works for Sean Payton, his offense, he gets his revenge. So good for them, for the Broncos, and staying afloat, and very quietly, oddly 4-3, especially surprisingly 3-1 on the road. And usually Denver's more of a home team. But anyway, good for them. And Saints just seems like this free fall is only going to get worse. Like you mentioned with the Kamara news, I don't know if that means he's going to miss time. It makes me, and this is ironic too. They did a day ago. They signed him to a 2-year extension. So I don't know. It'd be interesting to see how they write him out, or maybe they play it safe, play Mark-Andre Miller going forward. Since like we just said, everyone's out. It seems like. I know they're 2-5, but it seems like it's despite the hot start, it may be time to throw in the towel, at least playoff aspiration wise. But good for the Broncos. Key win there. A tough loss for the Saints at home on Thursday, and we'll see if the free fall continues, because it doesn't seem like, not a lot of signs are pointing that it won't. But that's the previous Thursday nighter that the Broncos took care of business there. Now let's go across the pond, as there was the early game Sunday. I did not watch this game live. I watched the condensed version, and I don't think it seems like I missed out on much. I think many others would agree. I'm not sure if you managed to wake up for this one. The Jaguars beating the Patriots 32-16. As we kind of anticipated, Jaguars kind of showed up and played to their full potential, it seems like here. But what were your thoughts in regards to the Jags bouncing back?
Well, since you only have something quick to say, how about you go first on this one?
I mean, for me, it's just like they established the run game, and granted, it was a Tank Bigsby. Maybe I'm still high on ETN stocks, but I mean, maybe it might have to be a 1A, 1B type team. Regardless, I mean, that helps. And then it wasn't. I mean, like you alluded to a little bit with Bo Nix not having to throw the ball, 30, 40 times, drop back and just be predictable. Trevor Lawrence only had to throw 20 times. Now, granted, it did pull away in the second quarter, big second quarter, but I mean, they capitalized on plays. Brian Thomas had a couple of big plays, and just didn't have to rely on Trevor Lawrence dropping back consistently. To add a little bit more had different ways to win there. And then, just for the most part, no shock, though, in regards to the Patriots, because we know that their skill position players are not great. And, Drake May still a little bit raw, still pretty good, I will say, on Drake's part, despite not having a run game and being behind the 8 ball basically for the whole game. Played pretty well. Still some things to work on, but he did pretty good. So, those are my quick thoughts on the London game. What about you?
Yeah, I thought it was a heck of a Drake May game. We talked about the turnovers last week, despite the encouraging signs. Didn't turn the ball over in this one, and I think that was big. Obviously, it's against Jacksonville's defense, banged up, especially in that cornerback room with no Tyson Campbell. But, when it's your second start ever and you're the New England Patriots, can't really get nitpicky with that kind of stuff. You're just looking for improvement, and that this was improvement off of the first game he had, right? So, once again, we already talked about the fact that Jacoby Brissett, throughout the first however many games, had not thrown for over 200 yards and multiple touchdowns. Drake May has now done it 2 games in a row. That's despite the fact that in both games they had a non-existent run game. He was their leading rusher in this one, 3 carries for 18 yards. They ran for 38 yards as a team. He accounted for half of that. So, tough day for the Patriots run game, which they couldn't really commit to the run game, like you said, because they were behind the 8 ball so fast. But even when they tried it, it was absolutely pitiful. So no run game to speak of. And yet Drake May was still able to do what he did. No turnovers. Not a very inspiring receiving room, considering even, some of the injuries that have happened over there. And yet still, he's looking good. So great game from Drake May. I had walked it back, so I'm not going to sit here and toot the horn of, I think he should have started right away. And who knows, maybe the 4 weeks of being benched did help him kind of see, the weaknesses of the team and how he probably has to adjust to those things. But I do stand by the take that from the get-go, I did think Drake May was a better quarterback than Jacoby Brissett. And despite all the concerns that everybody's had about the offensive line, like I said, I walked it back because I saw how bad the offensive line was playing with Jacoby Brissett. He only got sacked 2 times, and I think part of that is due to the fact that he's playing smart out there. I think he realizes the weakness that they do have on the offensive line, and he's getting the ball out quick. So kudos to Drake May for that. On the Jaguars side, much-needed win, good win. Listen, Tank Bigsby is having some incredible games, and I got to be honest, as a Travis Etienne believer, we both had him better than Najee Harris in that draft class. And as someone who owns Travis Etienne in both of the dynasty leagues I participate in, I don't love to see this, but at the same time, I can't deny the fact that Tank Bigsby is looking really dang good for the Jacksonville Jaguars. And it's unfortunate that Etienne is currently hurt because, maybe you start to consider for Jacksonville, do we trade him? I don't know if a team would trade for him in his current state, considering the injury or whatever. I don't know the price tag that would be on him, considering that he's probably coming up on a contract extension here soon. I don't know what he could get in the open market. And I do know that the Jags probably still want to use both because Tank Bigsby throughout this whole season, I believe, has 1 catch. So he's not good in the receiving game where, in this game specifically where Etienne was out, Dearness Johnson took over that role, and Etienne thrives in that role. So I don't think Jacksonville is necessarily going to want to trade him. But I don't know. I don't love seeing Tank Bigsby have such good games because I believe Tank has gone for over 100 yards 3 times on the season, which Travis has not done in a very long time, even considering the fact that last year he was getting a ton of carries, and going over 100 was on the ground specifically. He was doing it total with the receiving, but on the ground was not a consistent thing for him. So, other than that, I don't really have much to say about Jacksonville. You beat the Patriots. You did what you got to do.
Yeah, you saved Doug Peterson. You got Doug Peterson. You're allowed back on the plane back home. Basically. But we're just still under close eye, as I don't even know what they face next. But I think we mentioned it was pretty tough sledding. But good win for the Jags. Like we said, much needed for some of the some positions there. But anyway, let's go to the noon games for Sunday. Starting with a game within your division. Went kind of the way both expected. As I remember, you put 200 on this one. This is one of your bigger bets. I put 100. And yeah, paid off for us. Eagles, they not only covered, obviously won this one convincingly, 28-3 against the New York Giants. Revenge game for Saquon. had a buck 76 rushing, a touchdown. Probably could have had more. I'm sure we've all kind of seen that clip. Sirianni wanted to get him his career high. Saquon was like, no, I'm chilling. Because they were beating the Giants pretty bad. So any thoughts here in regards to the Eagles dominating the Giants?
On the Saquon thing, I mean, obviously, cool moment from Saquon. At the same time, as we saw with some games later in the slate, maybe when you're blowing a team out, you don't need to go for records and stats and all that kind of stuff, right? Because injuries do happen, and injuries have been absolutely brutal in the NFL this year. Especially at the wide receiver position. I mean, how many Nico Collins, Rashee Rice, Chris Godwin this week?
We mentioned Shaheed, who's out for the rest of the year.
Olave, Shaheed. Yeah,
I forgot about Puka Nacua. We'll talk about the Rams later, but he just apparently may come back soon, but who knows there? So, yeah, like you said.
Puka and Cooper Kupp. T. Higgins started off the season with missing time. Christian Watson has been banged up. Like, it's terrible. So, the fact that the Eagles realize we're blowing them out, we don't need to play the guys, whether that be because Saquon Barkley said it or not, I think is a good thing. Listen, stats are, who cares about getting your career high? I get it's a revenge game, blah, 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 but it's like, at the end of the day, I think that if you're the Philadelphia Eagles, you have much higher aspirations than beating up on the New York Giants. So, and if you're Saquon Barkley, especially considering that, he knows what it's like to sit there, be on a losing team his entire career, outside of that one season they made the playoffs. I think if Saquon Barkley, if anybody on that team wants it, it would be him. So anyway, on the Eagles, I mean, they got the win. They crushed the Giants. They did what they had to do. A.J. Brown had a heck of a game. Other receivers didn't really have to because they only threw the ball 15 total times. They ran it 45 times for 269 yards, 6 yards a carry, 3 rushing touchdowns. Jalen Hurts doing what he does, poaching Saquon's touchdowns with some tush pushes. So yeah, I mean, I don't have much to say about Philly. This is a game they absolutely should dominate the Giants. The one credit I will give them is, remember how I talked about both Dallas and Cincinnati when they played the Giants, it felt like they should have had a absolute crushing victory. They weren't able to do that. Philly did, and so that's an encouraging sign for the Eagles. Once again, it's what you're expected to do, and they did it, where Dallas and Cincy didn't. And obviously, you can look at the records and see the kind of difference between the three teams. So, yeah, good win for Philly. For the Giants, Drew Lock came in because they benched Daniel Jones at some point. Daniel Jones was talking about it in the post-game press conference. He's a little upset. Daniel, you stink. All right, I know you're upset, but just prepare for it, buddy, because quite frankly, this is probably your last year's starting quarterback for the New York Giants.
Yeah, and a little bit is like we talked about, like obviously just not a lot of, the only blue chip guy really on the Giants that we can, and once again, not really say for sure, still a rookie like Malik Nabers right now. And even then.
But did you see the thing about Malik Nabers after the game?
I did not. Did you say something?
In the locker room, they asked him, Malik, why do you think you had, a relatively quiet game today? And he said, go watch the routes. I was open.
Oof.
That was all he said.
Damn. So. All right. Well, then, yeah, he feels differently. But yeah, I mean, all I want to add in regards to this game, like it basically just kind of spoke for itself. Like Eagles dominated. They didn't really have to pass ball. Jalen Hurts only had to throw the ball 14 times, under 14 yards, and most of that was to A.J. Brown. Otherwise, it was just, we're going to ride Saquon. A little bit like you said, they just dominated. They didn't need to do more. The defense was all over Daniel Jones. I mean, that probably got to his head. And yeah, we'll see, how the Giants regroup, because it's also, especially I feel like in New York, and I like Brian Daboll, especially as an offensive mind, and maybe needs elsewhere, maybe treat him better as a head coach in the future, but it just feels like, sometimes it just doesn't work out, as we've mentioned before, with some good, good football minds. It just feels like as good of an OC he is, offensive designer, just the pieces aren't there maybe for the Giants. It's all not gelling together, and they may need a hit or reset, like you're alluding to, after this season, or maybe even sooner. Starting it now, and we'll see. But tough loss at home for the Giants, and I'm sure their owner not very happy. As I'm sure everyone's seen, I'm gonna be sick if Saquon goes to the Eagles, and he did, and not only that, went back to New York, and just ran all over y'all, literally. So, good win for the Eagles, convincing. We'll move on to a little bit more surprising result, as another game that was a blowout in the NFC. The Seahawks, they beat the Falcons 34-14 on the road. And just, especially I feel like at halftime, Seattle had much control in this game. But what were your thoughts here in regards to the Seahawks getting a crucial win here over the Falcons.
Did not expect it at all. If you told me that Bijan Robinson was going to run for over 100 and a touchdown on 5 yards a carry, if you told me that Kyle Pitts was going to have 7 for 65, Drake London was going to have 6 for 63 and a tutty, I was not expecting Atlanta to lose that game, quite frankly. But Kirk threw 2 picks. He also lost a fumble. Meanwhile, on the other side, Geno Smith and the Seahawks did not turn the ball over. Geno did fumble one time, but then he recovered it. So, yeah, like it's just, I think it's really as simple as that, because when you look at the rest of the game, Atlanta outran Seattle when it came to the rushing yards. Like, Kenneth Walker had a solid game. He did have less carries, and they ran the ball less than Atlanta did overall. And then Tyler Algier also chipped in for Atlanta. But like, Seattle had less rushing yards. The passing game was basically the same. Kirk had 232 passing yards. Geno Smith had 207. So there wasn't really a big difference between the two teams in that regard, outside of the turnovers. That's pretty much it. And Seattle, once again, didn't turn the ball over, capitalized on their drives, resulting in touchdowns, resulting in field goals, etc., getting points on the board. Whereas for Atlanta, they missed a field goal. They also, once again, had those 3 turnovers, and one of which was, I believe, returned for a touchdown by Seattle. So, yeah.
Scoop and score.
Yeah, so scoop and score. They had that missed field goal. There was that interception that was late in the game, right after, I believe, the scoop and score, which gave Seattle short field position where they just instantly got another field goal off of it. So that's just, it felt like Seattle was taking advantage of their opportunities, and Atlanta simply wasn't.
Yeah, just to put a kind of a bow on that, like, felt like to Seattle, important to note, their first round pick, Byron Murphy II, he was healthy, so we saw their kind of fully healthy front. Oh, they did obviously allow some to be ran on, like you mentioned, caused some key turnovers, especially the sacks. And we know with Kirk Cousins, more of a pocket guy, so you mentioned the scoop and score, and so I think it's a little bit more Seahawks defense kind of getting back on track, maybe catching Falcons a little bit off guard. And like you said, just those early opportunities, unfortunately, for the Falcons couldn't really get going well. And especially, too, just to, because I don't have much else, but especially the touchdown at the end of the half. Like, Falcons, you're really thinking, okay, they can at least make Seattle settle for a field goal. It's 3rd and 15 with 10 seconds left, at the 35 yards away, but some sort of mix up in their defensive coverage, and DK Metcalf's wide open in the middle, and now all of a sudden, could have been, 13-7 at the very worst, or not the very, but, realistically going into half for the Falcons, despite everything. And unfortunately, no, now you're down 17-7, and they were just in that hole that they couldn't get out of it. Then, the 3 Kirk, or especially those first 2, like you mentioned, turnovers in the second half just kind of was the icing on top for the Seahawks. So, it's good to see the Seahawks win. And like we said, too, a little bit kind of the theme, didn't have the concern we had going in, or at least I did. Seahawks very pass happy this time, obviously, because they're in the lead, had a lead, didn't have to throw the ball 40, 50 times with Geno Smith to be competitive. So good balance for them. Complementary football, as we always like to say. So, good. Seahawks get the crucial win, go to 4-3. So do the Falcons. So both these teams, interesting. That tiebreaker may go into effect towards the end of the year with how close the race is for the playoffs looking like, how it's looking like. But anyhow, let's go to one of the games of the early slate. And this one's actually competitive. It was my Green Bay Packers getting the win at home over the Houston Texans, 24-22, in those winter white uniforms. I'm just saying that because as a Packer fan, we've never done different helmets and stuff, so it's a literal rarity for that to happen. And of course, we also win at home too, so pretty great for that. But what were your thoughts on this game between two, pretty young but high flying and prominent teams?
Sorry, I tuned out for a second.
No.
Which game are we talking about?
We're talking my Packers against the Texans, 24-22.
I got lucky on this one because it was Packers, I believe, by 2.5, and they won by 2. So when it came to our spread picks,
Houston covered.
I felt very blessed on that Houston covered because I did pick them too, and the 2-point loss we got there. On the Packers, Jordan Love definitely has some Brett Favre in him. I know you sent me that meme where it's got the Brett Favre on one shoulder and the Aaron Rodgers on the other shoulder.
It was Dogger, but it was still a great meme.
I mean, other Packers fan. But yeah, so he's definitely got some Brett Favre in him because I'll tell you what, he has some moments where he's slinging some insane bullets that you're like, wow, that was a heck of a throw. And then he's also, I believe he's got 8 interceptions on the year right now. Which
and he missed 3 games, by the way.
Yeah, and he missed multiple games. Now, some of these games, obviously, like the Vikings game, I think back to, they were in a hole, and you just start airing that out, right? You know, but some of these other games, like this one specifically, it definitely felt like he was forcing things a little bit, and yet it sometimes you look at it and you're like, well, I mean, the forcing is also good though. That's what I'm saying with the Brett Favre. Like Brett Favre's got, I believe, the most interceptions of all time, right? Still, like I don't think he got passed by anybody.
Yeah,
and so he's got the most interceptions of all time, but also you were like kind of okay with it because the gunslinging, you know, it comes up with some incredible plays. Josh Allen has a little bit of that too sometimes. Like, remember when everybody's freaking out about his interception total, but it's like, yeah, but do you watch the game? Do you watch the guy play? Because it's like, yes, he threw 2 picks, but also he had some incredible plays that if you try to tone him down and change who he is, I don't know if those incredible plays will happen at the same rate. And so I'm not mad about the Jordan Love, the gunslinging that's happening. Joe Mixon in the run game did get going, but simply put, the Green Bay Packers pass defense was incredible in this one. They, you know, it felt like a very bend but don't break situation where, sure, Houston can run the ball, but we're going to take away the passing attack, and it wasn't necessarily by, you know, intercepting C.J. Stroud. It was simply by making the pass game incredibly inefficient. They really felt like this was the game where they needed Nico Collins because the big Tank Dell plays weren't there. It didn't happen. Green Bay took it away. Stephon Diggs was, you know, viable underneath, but a lot of it was just like screens and like this little dump off stuff that didn't go anywhere outside of like, I think that one play that went for like 15 or something. Dalton Schultz had his one play. Cade Stover had his one play. Like it felt like a bunch of guys having their like one explosive play. And that was kind of it. They couldn't like piece things together in the passing game. And on the flip side, Green Bay was able to do that, whether that be with Tucker Kraft, whether that be with Romeo Doubs, who had a heck of a game. It really felt like Green Bay's offense is truly, you know, reaching the pinnacle of what I think they can be. And what I mean by that is you don't know which receiver it's going to be every week. This week and last week, Romeo Doubs had great games. This one, he had 8 for 94. Last week, he had the 2 touchdowns. But previous weeks, we've seen, okay, this is a Jaden Reed week. Okay, this is a Dontavian Wicks week. Okay, you know, Christian Watson had a big game last week. So, like, you don't know. Like, sure, like in fantasy,
Kraft,
everybody's like, we don't. Sorry, what'd you say?
Sorry, I was just saying Tucker Kraft like 3 weeks ago.
Yeah,
2 touchdowns.
Yeah, the Tucker Kraft. Yeah, like you just don't know. And sure, in fantasy, you know, people hate that kind of stuff because it's like, well, who's startable? Because you're gonna have Christian Watson go for 1 catch, 9 yards this week. After last week, he had like 60 and a tutty. You're going to have Romeo Doubs do nothing for 4 straight games, get suspended because he's upset with his role, and all of a sudden he's got 2 touchdowns, 8 catches, and 94 the next week. You just don't know. Tucker Kraft, Dontavian Wicks, like I said, all these guys, you just don't know. But in real life, that's scary. That's scary because as long as somebody steps up each week, as long as LaFleur and Love can figure out who's the guy that's going to cook this week, the defense is going to be stressed because you just don't know who you have to focus attention to. It's like the complete opposite problem that the Dallas Cowboys are having, where the Cowboys, it's like, it's too obvious. Okay, you're going to throw to CeeDee Lamb and Jake Ferguson. Whoop-de-doo. Like, we know you're going to do that. With the Packers, you don't know. So the Packers offense is cooking. Josh Jacobs had a good game. He had some stuff going on the ground game. And the defense had a heck of a game stopping the pass. So Green Bay's starting to look scary because they're putting it together against good teams, which, you know, that's the litmus test in the NFL. That's what you want to see. Can you beat playoff teams? And they're starting to do it.
Yeah, man. Feels weird, kind of waxing poetically a little bit, but I'm going to continue this about my Packers. Yeah, you hit the main points of the offense. Like right now, we're seeing how dangerously balanced they are too. Because like you said, yeah, Josh Jacobs efficient, and it's not like he had the longest 27, but it's also not like he had one big long run. Like it's consistent, like gashing of 5-6 yards too. That's allowing Green Bay to continue to be aggressive in both, you know, yes, especially down the field. So now the defense, it's, you know, 2nd and 3, 2nd and 4, whole playbook's open. And like you just said, and we don't know who to key in on because now, like you said,
real quick, sorry to interrupt, but real quick on the Josh Jacobs thing too. The fact that it feels like you almost don't notice him, and then in the box score you look and the guy has 76 yards, over 6 yards a carry. That's like the crazy part about Josh Jacobs in this offense right now. It feels like the first couple weeks I was like, yep, there's Josh Jacobs. He's going to be the lifeblood. The last few weeks, I don't feel like I really notice him outside of a couple plays, but that's just because the offense is just moving and he's just doing his thing. He's just grinding it out, you know?
Yeah. So, I mean, so that's pretty big in regards. And I will say LaFleur, so great. I like that he's consistent with at least making you respect the sweeps. Like you can see the box score in this game, like Reed, Melton, Watson, they all got a touch. Didn't do much with it, but you can see it consistently. Even if you go back to previous games and box scores, that they consistently make the defense just think and feel. Make the defense respect everything basically. And like you alluded to, Love not afraid to throw it anywhere and in any place. Like and for better or for worse, the Tucker Kraft touchdown this week was for better. That's why arm strength matters there. And then sometimes, you get like even one of the picks I will say, and I think the second one was deflected too. I know the first one was deflected like right off the bat. So that was a little bit unfortunate there. But to segue into my latter part, I mean, the credit Packers defense too, like you mentioned, like especially right off the gate, you throw a pick, like your offense throws a pick like on the second or third play of the game. And now you're already in the red zone, having to run out there and stop a very good Texans offense, and like I said, hold them to a field goal there. And for the most part of the day, just did a great job of not letting CJ Stroud in the passing game get comfortable. A little bit is definitely not a little bit. A good portion of it is what you alluded to. Is that Nico is the guy that stretches out defenses. He's the vertical threat, and because Tank and Stephon Diggs are more short to intermediate. I think we saw that was an issue this game, as Packers were not afraid to take away all the short to intermediate stuff. And granted, Joe Mixon did go off, but they kind of lived with that. It felt like, and like you kind of mentioned with the receiving stats, just Stroud and the receivers never really got cooking, and even late in the game just didn't feel like. They were able to get that field goal late to put them up, but man, it was work for them a lot of the day, a lot of 3 and outs. So it's something that they're going to have to look into, because this is obviously something that going down the line, we're talking about other playoff teams or other good teams. They're going to look into this, and even when Nico comes back, that may be a focal point now. Is okay. We know that they struggle when they don't have when Nico's taken away. So it'd be interesting to see how they kind of zig from that, but nonetheless, I mean, it was a close loss, so they could have gone their way, and maybe definitely should have, considering that they lost the turnover battle so badly. Because Love, like we said, two interceptions, and then Ballantyne had a fumble, I believe it was like off a punt too, or a kick return. So there you go. There's another opportunity that should have set them up pretty well. But nonetheless, Packers prevail, and we'll see if we can keep this momentum going forward. And for the Texans, if they can, like we said, figure out life without Nico Collins while he's on the mend. So anything else before we move on to the next one?
Nope.
All right, cool. Let's go to this next game. This one definitely more short, not as sweet, depending on your perspective. But the Cincinnati Bengals, they beat the Cleveland Browns 21-14 in a crucial divisional battle. For the Browns, they traded Amari Cooper, last week, and then now, unfortunately, or maybe depending on your viewpoint, Deshaun Watson, torn Achilles, he's out now for probably the rest of the year. Who knows the future there? And it just feels like, man, they just get Nick Chubb back, and then this all just starts. Any hope that they had was immediately dashed away. But your thoughts here in regards to the Bengals beating them on the Browns?
The Bengals, they took care of business. Joe Burrow, another great game. He's been having, honestly, a very quietly solid year. I think it's because they're 3-4. They haven't really been beating great opponents, but he's been cooking. So good stuff from Joe. T. Higgins also, ever since he came back from injury, he has out-targeted, I believe, Jamar Chase in every game they've played together so far in the season. And I mean, in terms of production, if you look between the two, if you actually had to see who the wide receiver one is right now, it'd be T. Higgins. And so maybe that gives the Bengals some thoughts about their future when it comes to the T. Higgins contract situation. Other than that, Chase Brown continues to take over that backfield. It feels like, despite the fact that he was incredibly inefficient this week, Zach Moss was also inefficient. In fact, even more so. 6 carries for only 7 yards, 1 yard a carry. But it feels like Chase Brown is pretty much taken over the backfield. He had 15 carries to Zach Moss's 6. He also had 2 receptions on 2 targets, where Zach Moss, he had 3 on 3, and Zach was the more efficient one when it came to the receiving game. But that was like, 3 targets to 2. That's kind of, 50-50 at that point. So seems like it is now Chase Brown's backfield officially, and I think it's a good move. I still think you want to keep Zach Moss involved to keep Chase fresh, obviously. And, Zach has proven to probably be the better receiver so far, just based on the opportunities he's been given. He's been getting, the more explosive plays in the receiving game. But I think Chase Brown's taken over the backfield, so that's good. For Cleveland, the offense was still terrible. Sure, Nick Chubb's back, and he did get a touchdown. That was good to see, but, he had 11 carries for 22 yards, so he didn't really contribute much on the ground game. David Njoku, good to see him back because, he's a stud. We saw that last year at the end of the season when Joe Flacco was just dicing up defenses with Njoku. And, it seems like he's going to be continuing to do that this year. The only unfortunate part for Cleveland, or if you ask their cheering fan base, which I think is not a great look. I don't think you want to cheer no matter who gets injured, even though, Deshaun has the history, I guess, when it comes to the off-the-field stuff. But Deshaun Watson is out, and it's going to be Jameis Winston time. So I don't know. We'll see if Jameis can provide them a spark, because despite the fact that Deshaun, it's weird because he was being really efficient. In this game, it was 15-17.
He's actually kind of cooking.
They're just... Yeah, but they just weren't resulting in touchdown drives. There wasn't explosive plays. And so maybe Jameis is what you need, because Jameis is certainly going to be more erratic and probably push things a little more than maybe Deshaun will. And maybe that's going to lead to less efficiency, but maybe it'll lead to points on the board, because sometimes you just gotta try and do something explosive. So I don't know what else to say about Cleveland, because they're 1-6, and I don't know.
Yeah, not much hope. I will say in regards to that, at least my opinion of it. Terrible that the fans booing anybody for injury. I know it's even some with a complicated passing, and it's a little bit ironic because I don't know all the fans that booed. Who knows? For no one's keeping a head count. No one can. Probably the same fans that were cheering him on, and it's whenever they first signed him, and I don't know. Anyway. A little bit, I blame the owner. If I had to blame anybody, it's kind of like karma. You kind of sold out in a sense, to bring in Deshaun Watson despite everything and give him the extension. And now it's, this was the worst case scenario basically, and it's happened. So I don't know what. Yeah, it's tough to see what the future is. Luckily for them, I will say for Cleveland in the future, and we'll see how much more they sell in terms of selling getting rid of guys for assets to kind of to kick on this year. It'll be interesting to see, I guess, or the fact is they have a good base. We know that their tackles haven't been healthy. They just came back, and Wills hasn't kind of underperformed since he was a high first round pick. But he's been solid. When he's healthy in the past, he's been solid. And even if Conklin doesn't ever really come back, I believe they're big right tackles. DeJuan Jones out of Ohio State. He's in his second year. I know he's also coming off an ACL from last year, but he, really well. So, like we said, the bread and butter, the meat and potatoes, the base of the team is good. We know the defense can be good, and they held the Bengals offense to 21 points, and I think one of that was a kick return. No, off rip. So that really wasn't the defense. That's special teams. So in a sense, defense is doing all they can, like we've mentioned. And is talented. I'll be interested to see if they do trade one of their corners. That's apparently one of the rumors. So we'll see. But nonetheless, regardless, still have Denzel Ward and just other really good pieces and on that Cleveland defense. So we'll see what position they take. And honestly, I wouldn't be shocked though if maybe they get. Not saying they're going to make a playoff run, but maybe win a couple games later down the road, especially once Nick Chubb gets healthy. Maybe give them an identity, something that we've been mentioning. Of maybe being a run first team, but then Jameis can throw some strikes, down the field off play action to, in Njoku, Elijah Moore, or Cedric Tillman's been having a pretty productive few recent weeks. So maybe that can be a gem for them, as not gem, but a guy that they can build with going forward. But yeah, tough loss for Cleveland. Yeah, Cincinnati took care of business. I guess I will say good on them for I thought they would get run on a bit more this game. They did not. Their run defense held up pretty well for the obviously. So kudos to their defense because they've had a rough start to the season, and obviously won the day here, even though it was against a like we mentioned, not great Cleveland offense, and especially with no offense to Dorian Thompson-Robinson, but that also felt weird too. Like I think we all know what Dorian is, even though he's in the second, third year, and I think most of us that watch football would have already questioned talent-wise why Jameis was the third string as opposed to the second string, and it definitely the many other people, other pundits in this community have also basically probably drawn the conclusion that it's likely because they didn't want the pressure of in case Deshaun kept struggling of hey, let's call for the backup Jameis, as opposed to now you're calling for the backup, it's Dorian Thompson-Robinson. So anyway, and regardless, Dorian got pulled this game in, so there you go. We'll see what happens with the Browns. As 1-6 seems like their season about done, and Bengals though still alive as they seem to always be. So maybe this will they're on that mid-season run that puts them back in the playoff race, but still more work for them to do. But let's go from that AFC divisional matchup to a much more exciting one in the good old NFC North. The second to last perfect team has fallen. The Minnesota Vikings were not able to keep their perfect streak alive at home too. Lions get the win here on the road, 31-29. Fun competitive game between these two division rivals. What were your thoughts here in regards to the Lions giving the Vikings their first loss of the season?
The one thing I really noticed from this one was the Lions were very prepared for what Brian Flores was going to do. They flashed up some stat during the game where the Lions blitzed Jared Goff in 15 plays or something like that, and on those plays he was like 12 of 13 or something crazy when it came to his efficiency. Like the blitz was not affecting Jared Goff at all. And also there's that one crazy clip too. Speaking of just blitzing and all that kind of stuff, did you see that clip of Christian Darrisaw on that one play where
he blocks the guy going? They did a twist, so he blocks the first guy going inside, and he manages to recover and block the other guy.
Yeah, Christian Darrisaw is a freak, and that's a victory lap we can both take because we did put him above Rashawn Slater, which Slater's also a stud too when he's healthy.
Yeah,
so,
injury, that's unfortunate.
By no means is it like Slater sucks, haha. But Christian Darrisaw, I mean, listen, I put him in my top 5 offensive linemen. When we did that during the offseason, and I can't remember, but I feel like I said something along the lines of if there's anybody that's the successor to the Trent Williams throne, it feels like it's going to be Christian Darrisaw. And that play, the athleticism required for an offensive lineman to do that, guy's a freak. Anyway, back to the Lions. Jared Goff didn't feel pressure at all. 22 of 25. This is multiple weeks in a row now where this guy is incredibly efficient. You got to give credit to Ben Johnson, the offensive coordinator. He's still cooking. The offensive line has been fantastic. Threw 2 touchdowns, one to Amon St. Brown, one to Khalif Raymond, who had a crazy get-off when he was able to score his tutty. Jahmyr Gibbs, this was like, we talked about the Packers offense with the receivers. With the Lions, it's becoming that way with, and we already knew that, but with their offense as well, where it could be a David Montgomery week, it could be a Jahmyr Gibbs week, it could be both, it could be an Amon St. Brown week. This season, it really hasn't been a Laporta week, unfortunately. It could be a Jameson Williams week, which also this week it was not, as he had 1 catch for -4 yards, and now he's suspended for multiple games due to performance-enhancing drugs. Anyway, Jahmyr Gibbs, he had a heck of a day. Amon St. Brown had a heck of a day. The Lions showed resiliency against this Vikings team. The Vikings had some good moments. Aaron Jones had a heck of a game, and it felt like, honestly, they should have ran him more, considering the results that they did have, 93 yards and a touchdown on 14 carries. I think they should have ran it more than they did. But even then, the passing attack was largely working as well. It just seemed like, honestly, the difference was, that one interception that Sam Darnold did have when it came to the passing attack was kind of tough because then the Lions scored a touchdown off of it right before halftime. And that interception came off the Lions already scoring a touchdown to take the lead. And so they scored a touchdown. Actually, we can even go through that whole stretch, right? Because we've been giving the Vikings a lot of credit for their first quarter starts, right? I mentioned that a couple weeks ago where they are outscoring their opponents like crazy in the first quarter. And that actually happened in this game. And so I remember seeing this and I was like, dang, Minnesota might be like the real deal, because doing it against the Jaguars or whatever, that's one thing. Doing it against the Detroit Lions, that's another. You're up 10-0 on this team. And then even then, after the 10-0 start, you then force a 3-and-out immediately and force a punt. But then Detroit's defense holds strong. After a touchdown and field goal, they force a punt. Then they get a touchdown. 5 plays, 69 yards. They get that touchdown. I believe a big chunk of it was the Jahmyr Gibbs. Yeah, I'm looking at it now. Jahmyr Gibbs, 45-yard run for the touchdown. So all of a sudden now they found their lifeblood. Then their defense holds out again, another punt. Then they get another touchdown, which was the big Amon-Ra St. Brown one, where he had a 35-yard touchdown. And even prior to that, I believe there was a roughing the passer. So he got Amon-Ra St. Brown on the first play, got 17 yards. Roughing the passer adds another 15. So Amon-Ra St. Brown has 50 plus yards on that play, or on that drive, or actually even more, because he got another 12-yard play on that drive. So, I mean, the guy carried. He basically had 70 yards on that drive for another touchdown. Then they get the interception, and now Detroit's in that mode where they're starting to roll, because then they get that next touchdown right before halftime. And that's the scary part about the Lions, is when you let them roll. Now, Minnesota did show some resiliency. They brought it back. They ended up taking the lead late in the game. But unfortunately, the Lions, they come out on top. And I don't know. I don't know how to feel about the Vikings, because I felt like they might drop down at some point and feel like frauds. As teams kind of learn the schemes, because it does feel like the coaching is really what's putting them over the edge here, as opposed to maybe some of the talent on the defensive end, as opposed to the talent of Sam Darnold. But they had a heck of a game against the Lions, and honestly, I feel like this was a positive game for both teams.
Yeah, I want to say with the Lions, like, kudos to, you mentioned their defense had some key stops. Kudos to Brian Branch. He's been stepping up big for them. They let go of Chauncey Gardner-Johnson over the offseason. So there's a little bit of the question. We saw Branch flash in his rookie year, but hey, always the question of, can they keep taking steps, can they keep progressing? You mentioned that big pick. I mean, he was the one on that. And even then, that was a great recovery by him. It was like on that crosser, I think, to Addison on the right sideline. And then, yeah, like you said, that just kind of kept that snowball momentum for the Lions going in that moment. But yeah, I think the big thing that I was worried about, and I mean, not many other teams are probably going to be able to give the Vikings and Brian Flores defense this issue. But yeah, like the Lions, it seemed like they were just at times willing to call the Vikings bluff in terms of, okay, you want to have 7-8 guys in the box, that's fine. Like, we're gonna bring in Dan Skipper as an extra lineman and have Laporta, and maybe another tight end or whatever, and yeah, we'll call your bluff because you have 4 or 5 linebackers, and we're just bigger than you. And yeah, it opened up a lot of holes. I mean, even David Montgomery had a huge fumble, and that was later in the game, but they were able to overcome that because like their offense was just a little bit to, we mentioned the Packers, but even more so, just operating on all cylinders and just huge efficiency there, like you mentioned with Goff. And put the Vikings in a bind, like on that Amon-Ra touchdown towards the end of the half, where the Vikings they wanted to blitz they wanted to blitz to slow down the run, and then Goff was able to take advantage of that. And last point I wanted to make for the Lions was like you mentioned with Jared Goff was kudos to him, because like you mentioned the stats against pressure, and that was like one of the biggest red flags for Jared Goff, especially coming from leaving the Rams to the Lions, was his biggest weakness that many of us felt was obviously outdoors, but dealing with pressure, he was not great with that, but he seems to have gotten better. I think that's mostly in part due to the system too, though, because most of those times he's just willingly stepping up into can step into the pocket and throw a laser to Amon-Ra St. Brown or whoever else is open or about to be open. So, he's playing with high command of the offense. Kudos to him there. And, despite the loss, like Vikings offense, like you mentioned, was able to move the ball and have success. So, and once again, no TJ Hawkinson for them, too. And he is apparently going to be coming back soon. So maybe that can help even bolster that offense even more. And, Aaron Jones still healthy and, like you said, still very efficient. So as long as that's going on, like we just kind of mentioned with some of these really good teams, balance is key. So we'll see if they can keep this up. I assume that they will, but it'd be interesting because apparently, I don't know if there's real, but they were talking about maybe Stafford, and I hear it because obviously, look, as great as Darnold's been this season, Stafford would be an upgrade. I don't know how exactly they would swing that. It's probably why that deal hasn't come down, but nonetheless, doing pretty good with what they got in Minnesota. So we'll see if, despite the loss, they can keep their previous success going and build off this. But no longer perfect there. The Vikings, they fall to 5-1. Lions also 5-1. So it'll make things interesting in the old NFC North going forward and NFC period. But let's move on over, unfortunately, to another game. This one not as eventful, and I almost forgot to actually put this on the rundown. But it was the Indianapolis Colts. They get the win over the Miami Dolphins, 16-10. I mean, I feel like the score kind of already tells everything about this game. No offense to the Colts, you got the win, but that kind of goes to show what kind of a struggle this game was. But what were your thoughts, if you had any or many, on this game?
I mean, good win for the Colts. Like you said, you just, it was ugly or whatever, but you got the win. That's kind of what matters. On the Colts, though, I'm going to be honest, this offense is so much worse with Anthony Richardson. I'm just going to say it. I mean, the guy's still like, 21, 22, so there's still time, but he never completes like 50% of his passes. The explosive plays haven't been there since week 1. I don't know. The offense just looks worse with Anthony Richardson, like plain and simple. It feels like the receiving game the passing game is just, it sucks. So I don't know. I don't know how to fix that. I don't know if Anthony Richardson's ever going to improve and become that kind of guy, but if you're not playing a bad team like the Dolphins, I feel like you lose this game, quite frankly, because they just didn't do anything on offense for the most part. That said, on the other side, the Dolphins did even worse. Achane had a good game. Raheem Mostert had a good game. They tried running the ball as much as they possibly could. They ran it 40 times, and they just simply couldn't close drives. Also, listen, I know that, like, Tua's the quarterback, and we've blamed the fact that they haven't prepared for this backup situation, and they should have gone out and signed a guy like Jameis Winston or whatever. I know we talked about that, but I got to throw some stuff towards this coaching staff, because how do you come off a bye week and we end the day with Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill, two of the most deadly receiving weapons in the league, and they combined for 2 catches for 19 yards? Like, how is that a thing? We can't throw a screen their way? Where's the jet sweeps? I know Tyreek had 1 carry for 5 yards, so like they attempted something in that, but like if I'm the Dolphins, the moment that Tua goes out, I am trying even more so to force feed the crap out of this ball to Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle to just let them make a play. And the fact that this has been a problem ever since Tua got hurt, that they can't get these guys the ball at all. Like, what is going on with this coaching staff? Like, Mike McDaniels being crowned like the next rising star of young offensive coaches and blah, blah, blah. And yet somehow this season, it's like, what has this offense become? It's pitiful. It's absolutely miserable. We've talked about it before. I don't think Tua fixes all these problems. There's no way that it's the drop off from Tua, and once again, the backups are bad, but there's no way the drop off from Tua to these guys is so significant that it's almost laughable how pitiful their offense is. There's just no way, especially since Tyler Huntley, I know he had short time to learn the playbook, but that guy, he got a Pro Bowl nod, albeit because a variety of quarterbacks said no to going, but he got a Pro Bowl nod the 1 year that he filled in for Lamar for like half a season. And I remember that year too. We were even talking about, is Tyler Huntley, not us, but there was narratives because, the media loves to do this. They did it with Cooper Rush and all that kind of stuff. But is Tyler Huntley better for the Ravens offense when it comes to passing the football? Because Mark Andrews was cooking. And so I'm shocked. I don't understand how this Miami offense is just this pitiful when you have Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle and you just can't get them the ball at all. I don't know. They're not even targeting them. I don't get it.
Yeah, I have no rebuttal in regards to that. I concur. Like, it's just, I don't know. And it seems like we'll just have to kick that issue or concern down the road because obviously Tua coming back. So in theory, the offense should be better because, oddly enough, Tua Non's been as we know, one of them has been really oddly. It's been a plus for them the whole Tua being out because they're saying, he's without him, the offense is anyway. And even though not that even regardless, the offense wasn't great at the beginning of the year when he was there. So who knows if if him coming back will fully solve all those issues. Obviously, like you mentioned though, I would assume him coming back means the more Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle because that's just crazy. And the fact that I know Jonnu Smith's good, but man, like did they spend that bye week drawing up did they pull an Arthur Smith and spend that bye week drawing up Jonnu Smith plays? Like I don't.
That's what I'm saying.
I don't know. And yeah, so I'm not gonna add on to it because you think you hit all the points there. The only thing I want to mention with the Colts too is a little bit what you said. It's like the inconsistency. Obviously, you see with Richardson, it is tough that no Jonathan Taylor, and obviously I think he's like the main driving force of the explosive plays when Richardson's there, and obviously doing more off that. So maybe him coming back will help, but yeah, a little bit of our concerns with Richardson, of course, the consistency as a passer in the NFL, kind of coming to light. Kind of reliant on those big plays, which teams are obviously mindful of that now. As we'll see. I mean, and then Richardson struggling with the short to intermediate stuff at times too, being an inconsistent thrower on a handful of throws that like those are kind of like NFL gotta have it. Like, sorry, buddy, but like 70% of the starters are going to make that. And obviously, like you mentioned, he's still young. He's missed a lot of time, so that adds on to it. But hopefully he can start getting that going because like Josh Downs, he had been cooking like you mentioned with Flacco in there. The passing game was actually pretty viable, and obviously took a step back this week with Richardson in. So. Hopefully it's a thing they can resolve to the Colts. Nonetheless, like we said, they get the win. And it's ironic too. Sorry, you mentioned all that stuff with the Dolphins struggling because this Colts defense hasn't been great either. So I felt like this was, if there was a week to get it going with your backup off a bye week, this was it. So unfortunate, but fortunate for us because you put 500, I put 250 on the Colts and they covered. So thank you, Indianapolis, for at least taking care of business there. Let's move on over to a game that was looking like it was pretty scary because it looked like they were not going to cover, and I put big money on the Bills here. But the Bills did prevail, especially in the second half, over the Tennessee Titans, 34-10. Granted, too, when we made our picks, we assumed that Levis was going to be the starter, but actually Mason Rudolph was. Levis dealing with an AC joint issue. Was not looking good as the Titans were up 10-7 going into halftime. But then, Bills quickly shut that door closed. Amari Cooper got going and such. What were your thoughts on the Bills win here?
I mean, Buffalo rolled, and honestly, the only thought I had when I looked at this game was, number one, Keon Coleman finally had a pop-off performance, 4 catches for 125 yards. Love to see that for the guy because it felt like he was having his one explosive play a game, and that was it. But he has pop-off performance. And then other than that, I mean, it's a blowout, so I didn't really have much to think about outside of the fact that, man, you remember that one, I think it was either Sunday or Monday night game between the Titans and Bills like a couple of years ago. It was like a fantastic game that like resulted in Buffalo going for like the touchdown to win at the end, and like they got stuffed and Tennessee won.
Yeah, they actually had a lot of good battles back when Henry and Tennessee. And was it the COVID year when the game was like on a Tuesday or Wednesday?
Yeah, it was some weird day. Anyway, what a fall from grace Tennessee has had. Like they had AJ Brown, they had Derrick Henry, they had Mike Vrabel, and that defense was cooking. And now they suck, and they've traded away DeAndre Hopkins. I'm sure Calvin Ridley wishes that he was traded away instead.
Even though he just signed there too.
Yeah, like Tennessee has become a dumpster fire, and it's depressing to see because I really feel like it's a lot of self-inflicted stuff. Why didn't you just pay AJ Brown? Derrick Henry, it felt like was, even on the outside looking in, so I can't fully blame him for this one because I'm very much in the camp of don't pay running backs, but the Ravens have figured out a way to reinvigorate that man's career. Why did we fire Mike Vrabel because of one bad season when clearly he was the key to so much of your success for however many years y'all had him? Like, I don't know. The Titans are just dumpster fire, and I feel like at this point, with the DeAndre Hopkins trade, just tear it all down. Yeah, and the weird part too is, like you should have said though, they just paid Calvin Ridley and Tyler Boyd and Tony Pollard. Like, it felt like they were trying to still hold on, and it's bad. It's bad.
Yeah, I think obviously I don't mean to put it on one position usually, but quarterback is a big issue, and the thing that they've, especially as Tannehill, started to wear down and just not be as good. I think a little bit of this demise has just been front office, like you said, front office issues. I mean, you brought it back to not paying AJ Brown, and then obviously that led to Vrabel getting fired because they had it was AJ. The offense was primarily AJ Brown, Derrick Henry. Those two guys they were able to build off of and such. And then since then, I mean, we saw with Malik Willis. I know it was a 3rd-round pick, but still, that didn't work out. And then it's tough to see that he goes to Green Bay, and I'm not better than Love, but hey, he saw much better. He did much better in the 2-3 weeks he was in Green Bay. Literally 2-3 weeks. I remember he was traded a couple days before week 1 or whatnot, and barely went to playbook. He had much more success there as opposed to when he was in Tennessee. So and I will credit Tennessee. Defense is pretty good, like we saw in the first half. Yeah, for the most part, they held their own. But as we've talked about before, any good defense, it doesn't matter how good you are if you're on the field a lot and your offense isn't punching back per se, especially against an elite quarterback who now has a multitude of weapons, especially Cooper being, like we said, the consistent 3-level threat, short but mainly intermediate to deep threat. Now that opens up Keon Coleman, like you mentioned, and we saw this game where now he's maybe not getting the number 1 guy and able to do stuff. And then Shakir, we all know he's more of a short intermediate guy, but he kind of 7 for 65, kind of working the slot there. And then just the trickle down of that. And even then, like Cooper, I think he only had 19 snaps this game, so he not even fully integrated in the offense yet. And he was able to have some success there. And on a day where Buffalo couldn't run the ball, so usually that spells doom, as we kind of saw in the first half. But luckily, because usually it's just all on Josh Allen making plays, and with his legs and his arms. And it was a rare day where Josh Allen only ran the ball 3 times, and I'm not sure if that's even maybe that might be counting in some kneel downs. So let me double check. They did not kneel down. So anyway, but regardless, usually Josh Allen has to be as you know, and many others know, he has to be 5 rushes for 40 yards because he had to tuck it and run a couple times. So it's going to be interesting to see how much more they can integrate Cooper in, and if that can help keep this offense consistent. And because we've seen usually they beat up on the smaller teams, but against some of the elite teams they have issues. But looking like a good trade for the Bills. We'll see what direction the Titans take, and if what more they'll sell before the deadline, as obviously at 1-5, and not even knowing if your questionable potential maybe future starting quarterback is even going to be playing next week, as he's dealing with the shoulder injuries. Not a good outlook. So and we'll see how that D-Hop trade goes, because obviously they got a 5th-round conditional 4th, so who knows what that'll be impact player. But we'll see how it works out for the Chiefs. We'll talk about them later. But good win for the Bills. They stay on track in the AFC. Let's move on over to another team that two teams that potentially could be sellers. Both of them. We already saw that the Raiders have sold, and a lot of rumors around the Rams. But at least in regards to the game on Sunday, they beat the Raiders 20-15. As expected between these two teams. Not very pretty results, but nonetheless, Rams prevailed. What were your thoughts in regards to the Rams winning this one? And actually, oh no, my Raiders did cover. No mind. Sorry. What were your thoughts on the Rams?
The Raiders, also somewhat of a mess. Aiden O'Connell was named the starter. He gets injured. We bring in Gardner Minshew. He had a miserable day. 3 interceptions. Couldn't complete 50% of his passes. The run game was working, and they tried to run, but they were also trailing for a lot of the game, so you just can't really commit to it forever. Brock Bowers is the only receiver that really did anything of note. Jacoby Myers was injured, so he wasn't playing. And that was despite the fact that, the Rams didn't really do much against you. Kyren Williams did score the 2 touchdowns, but, largely the run game for him was inefficient. Only 3.5 yards a carry. Stafford didn't, dice you up in the air. It was just too many self-inflicted wounds from the Raiders that, it's kind of what happens. Even the touchdown drive that kicked off the scoring for the Rams, it was off one of the interceptions. And then immediately after they score that touchdown, the defense recovers a fumble and scores a touchdown there and puts them up 14-3. So it's just too many self-inflicted wounds for the Raiders, simply put. So.
Yeah, I concur, and especially against a Rams defense that we know to be suspect. giving them 4 turnovers, it's tough sledding. And it was tough because the day where they actually got Alexander Madison going, Brock Bowers is, even despite all the quarterback issues, he's still at least producing. But obviously, I think we're seeing it's part of the rebuild process, but got to figure out their receiver room as well. I mean, on top of the fact that, now they're stuck with Gardner Minshew in a sense, because Aiden O'Connell expected to miss 4 to 6 weeks with a thumb injury. So this whole quarterback controversy, in a sense, got solved for them, but in an odd way. And yeah, especially since, like we talked about, doubt they're going to trade Max Crosby, and I'm not sure there's many other pieces that are that desirable. We'll see. And we'll see what happens with the Rams, since apparently they're, I think they're more just fielding offers in case they, seeing how these next few weeks go, and if they have to just, kick the can down the road and go to next season. But I'd be interested to see if they make any moves too. But nonetheless, regards to the game here, they get the win, go to 2-4. So still, not out of it in a sense, but like we mentioned with some of these other teams under 500, especially at 2-4, uphill battle to climb there. So anyhow, speaking of uphill, let's go to another game in the NFC, or this one in the NFC. This was a blowout, so this will probably be short and sweet, as the Washington Commanders continue trucking along, even losing Jaden Daniels early in this game. They beat the Panthers 40-7, as Andy Dalton threw 2 picks. Just not a great game for the Panthers, as it seems like they've kind of come back to earth after that big win a couple of weeks ago, and a couple good performances. But what were your thoughts here in regards to the Commanders getting a big win?
Man, credit to the coaching staff, Dan Quinn, Cliff Kingsbury, all of them over there, because this is a game which, a lot of people have been giving a ton of credit to Jaden Daniels, and rightfully so. He's been having a heck of a year, but this is a game in which he goes out pretty much instantly, and Marcus Mariota comes in, and they keep cooking. They keep rolling. Brian Robinson Jr. had a good game. Terry McLaurin had a good game. Mariota had a good game, and the defense was fantastic once again. It's against the Panthers, who, like you said, they've definitely come back to earth. The key here in this one was Chuba Hubbard did not have a good game, even in some of their previous losses. Like, he's been absolutely cooking. He had 52 yards and a touchdown, but he was not efficient, which he has been recently. And so, credit to Washington, because, once again, although it's Carolina and it's not a team that necessarily, you give a ton of praise for beating, the circumstances of you lose your starting quarterback due to injury. He's out for the whole day. Now you got to throw Marcus Mariota, who is a veteran, in there, but still Marcus Mariota, who, wasn't great in Atlanta, hasn't, had really any great moments in his career for quite some time. And yet he has a standout performance. I think just goes to show the coaching staff and the preparation that this team has put in. And so you got to give him credit, because, like I've talked about with some, I brought up the Cincinnati and Dallas wins against the Giants, where didn't feel impressive despite the fact that it's a bad team. The Giants are certainly better than Carolina, but I don't think it's that big of a difference, quite frankly. And in those games, you don't have the excuse of injuries leading to unimpressive win. Washington certainly would have had an excuse, and yet they still went out there and they absolutely dominated. So shout out to Washington, because it was a good win.
Yeah, I want to shout out especially Washington's offensive line. They've been very good this year. I'm not gonna say they're elite, but they've overperformed for sure. That's been a big reason why they've had so much success too, along with Jaden Daniels, of course. But I think you definitely see it in a game like this, where, like you said, you lose your starting quarterback. We were just talking about the Dolphins. They've lost their starting quarterback for a couple of weeks. They haven't even figured out. They haven't had anything close to this efficiency. So credit to the Commanders' O-line and being able to lean on that, to run the ball a bit, and then obviously Mariota very efficient, and it helps too. I think familiar with a college-esque style system. We saw them run some hurry up too as well, things like that. So it's good to see that despite losing Daniels, he was comfortable stepping in and was able to operate at a high level, like we criticized some other teams for. And Carolina, I'm not going to say it's bench Dalton at all time. I don't know what the right move is. Regardless, like we said, this team's still one in that lower tier, and it'll be interesting to see if they can move some pieces. But just tough start, especially too. They didn't give themselves a great first drive leads to a pick six. So before even Jane Daniels touched the field, down 7-0, then they even go 3 and out afterwards. So that just adds to the momentum. And then before you can blink, the next possession, they throw an interception. They never really got anything going. And then, yeah, at halftime, down 27-0, it's GG's from there. Even despite the backup bit, I'm sure that's pretty demoralizing. So we'll see. Also very concerning that they just weren't able to get. I mean, really, you talked about the Dolphins struggling. Like here, it was just like there's just a Jatavian Sanders. Apparently, he was the only productive receiving option that they had. I know there's other talent there, Deontay Johnson and such, but just not a great day in the office for the Panthers. But I mean, that's not the first time they've done it this year. So we'll see if they're involved too in regards to selling any pieces at the trade deadline. But key win for the Commanders.
Deontay Johnson, just saying, who knows?
Yeah, it's interesting because a lot of people were kind of connecting him, trying to connect him to the Chiefs, which would have been a good fit. But who knows now that the Chiefs traded for D-Hop, but obviously some other teams that could.
Steelers have been looking for a receiver reunion,
but he just came from. I don't think so. I think it's too soon. Too soon. I'll ask my Steelers friend. Maybe Tomlin's that type of guy. I don't know, but we'll see.
I have seen some rumors that they're linking to the Cowboys.
I was gonna say Dallas. Like y'all need a second. But
the only reason I don't think it happens is because Jerry's gonna be like, "Well, Brandon Cooks is coming back soon," so then he's just not gonna do it. So
yeah, and I'm not sure. I think Deontay got not like a huge contract, but a pretty solid one from the Panthers. I'm not sure the guarantees either, so that also could play a factor for the Cowboys as obviously I'll still have to focus on a couple big extensions down the lines.
Listen, they got $29 million in cap space next year. So anyway, they could afford it, which I will say I don't want them to trade for Deontay Johnson because I don't think I don't think he's like a huge difference maker that's going to save the season for them. Like, you know what I mean? So
yeah, he doesn't move the needle enough, unfortunately, probably for what you'll give
for
up.
a team like Dallas.
Yeah. So anyhow, big win for the Commanders. We'll move on over. Sorry, Panthers fans, that's the way it goes. But let's go to the Super Bowl rematch here. As despite the score, I felt like it was just mainly domination from the Chiefs on both sides of or mainly on defense, but even the offense found some success. They beat the 49ers 28-18. Like I mentioned in our group chat, the Niners, it's just when it rains, it pours for them. It feels like in terms of injuries on a season. Last couple of years, they've been or especially last year, they were pretty fortunate in regards to the injury bug. But it is back in full force this year. As did lose Ayuk this game. Deebo Samuel came into the game already dealing with an illness, got worse. Poor guy's pneumonia now. Who knows his status going forward? And even Kittle left with or is dealing with a foot issue. So, and of course they lose this game against the Chiefs, who I'm sure they would like to get a win over to kind of get that. I can't think of a better phrase, but proverbial monkey off their back. But anyhow, John, what were your thoughts here in regards to the Chiefs coming out with the win yet again?
Interesting win for the Chiefs. Kareem Hunt definitely had a performance. I want to talk about Mahomes real quick because Patrick Mahomes is statistically not having a good season. Like, this year has been not good based on what we expect out of Mahomes. He has 6 touchdowns and 8 interceptions. He's completing 68% of his passes, pretty good there. He's got 1,400 yards, so decent. And certainly there's been some stuff when it comes to the weapons. Travis Kelce wasn't starting off great. Rashee Rice gets injured. We brought in Hollywood Brown. He's been out. So there's some excuses, right? Isaiah Pacheco goes out. But at the same time, Mahomes is not having a good year. And yet somehow, some way, it doesn't matter at all. And I think that's the scary part about the Kansas City Chiefs, is they're sitting at 6-0, despite the fact that Mahomes is turning the ball over, not throwing for touchdowns, and they still win. I don't know. I like, if there's any more indication that this team is truly gonna be a dynasty, I don't know what else you can think of. Like, they've won back-to-back Super Bowls, and Mahomes is having a bad year by his standards. And they're 6-0. What happens if all of a sudden Mahomes starts cooking? Like, that's the scary part about this team. We already knew that they've retooled around the defense, the run game, blah blah blah. And yet still you've got Xavier Worthy, a young rookie who. What happens if he starts exploding? You've got now you've brought in DeAndre Hopkins, a veteran who I still think has some left in the tank. I think he certainly has more than he was showing in Tennessee, for that matter, because Tennessee's a dumpster fire. So I don't know. Kansas City is scary. They're very scary. For San Francisco, this one hurts to lose because it was a winnable game. It's unfortunate that Ayuk's out for the year. You're still wondering when McCaffrey comes back, but I thought they were still largely competitive in this one, even despite the fact that Brock Purdy had a horrendous day. He did have 2 rushing touchdowns, which almost killed me in fantasy, but he threw 3 picks, and that was bad. So, yeah, I don't know. I think it's just weird because it feels like these two teams are both not playing at their full potential, and you just wonder, for Kansas City, considering the fact that they're not doing it, and yet they're 6-0, that's scary. For San Francisco, they don't have the same luck. They're not playing at their full potential due to a lot of injuries. And they're sitting at 3-4. But even for them, it feels like McCaffrey comes back, Debo comes back, Kittle, he's cooking despite the injury. Maybe they could keep cooking too. So I don't know.
Yeah. In regards to the Chiefs, offense, you kind of hit the main point there. It's just I do want to credit everyone. All those other stats valid, but hey, give credit to Mahomes for taking what he can, and a big reason of their success, at least this game, and I'm sure I haven't looked at the other games, but third down efficiency, that's hugely underrated if you want to look at stats. Chiefs 8 for 14, and I don't have the exact stats, but most of the time they are able to stay ahead of the chains and then make things manageable for Mahomes to, key third down. We all know that very likely he's going to be able to make a play, at least at that moment, and capitalize off that. And yeah, despite the 2 interceptions, kept the offense moving. Even Kareem Hunt is, like I said, I guess back in a sense. Maybe once again, we talk about some teams building from inside out. I think that helps when you have a pretty good offensive line, and despite the fact that you lost Isaiah Pacheco, and then like I said too with the Packers, as you can see in the box score and during the game, getting multiple guys involved, getting Nicole Hardman some sweeps, and bringing in Xavier Worthy as well, just stressing the defense out with your emotions and such. And then for the Niners, this is just, like I said, it's tough when you lose these guys, especially some of them in game, and then now you have to adjust. And then also lost. Did Ron Jennings even play in this game? I know he was maybe not, but I know he's already dealing with an injury, and he's probably their wide receiver 1 now. And then like you said, not the best game. It was not a good game for Purdy, despite the fact that he's actually been playing, I would say, pretty well this season. Actually, I've actually been kind of impressed by him. But yeah, this was not a good one on the report card, obviously. And kudos to the Spags, like I said, and the defense, because I think that's been the main factor for everyone else. I think we know, but everyone else especially the past year, they've been like, how are the Chiefs getting away with this stuff? There's that stat where they hadn't scored over 27 points in I think it was 7 or 8 games, stretching back to last year. So that just goes to show you how good the defense is. And like we said, especially, I know I mentioned it in the playoffs last year, the recipe basically is either, hey, keep us ahead and obviously the defense will do their thing, or even if, the Chiefs are behind, hey, defense, just keep us in striking distance, and 15 will eventually make plays or, capitalize, and, and the Chiefs will prevail for the most part, or have a chance to at least. And especially with DeAndre Hopkins, I imagine that will, especially the third down numbers, and maybe in their red zone efficiency, probably going to go up now that they have someone else besides Kelsey that you have to fear in the red zone. Even though, like you kind of alluded to, and we've been I'm sure everyone in football has noticed, Kelsey obviously not the same guy as he was a couple of years ago. So we'll see if they can still pull more out of him. But man, Noah Gray's, I know Kelsey's obviously the better tight end, probably scheme wise, but man, Noah Gray's, at least number wise, been putting up more numbers. But hey, and once again too with the Chiefs, like I mentioned a little bit earlier with the jet sweeps too, in the receiving game too, getting other guys involved like Watson, Justin Watson, and Mecole Hardman, like I said, in the passing game too. So good gritty win for the Chiefs, and all around for them. So there's that. Those are the Sunday afternoon games. Let's go to the Sunday night game. As this one was
sorry, before we move on, I do want to shout out the Niners though, because we've harped on many teams for not being prepared for possible injuries. The Niners are the opposite in that in terms of the receiving core. Yes, you lose Ayuk, that sucks. Yes, Debo's dealing with the sickness, that sucks. But you drafted Ricky Pearsall in the first round, and obviously the shooting thing it was unfortunate. But the guy, he's back now. So you were prepared for the potential possibility of whatever happens there, whether it be Ayuk is traded, whether it be Ayuk doesn't resign, whether it be a future Debo Samuel thing, whatever in the future. You brought in Pearsall. You drafted Cowing in the 4th round. Like, they're constantly making sure they have the ability to recycle at a very important position in receiver. So good on them for that.
Yeah, and some of the other bread and butter, like I said, Kittle still, even if he misses the next week, he'll still be available. And then even like as people may overlook, Juszczyk too. Like he does so much in there.
Yeah.
Everything, like a little bit of everything. Like those little key components. Hopefully, will keep them going there. And yeah,
also, actually, I had one more thing. Sorry, finish your statement. Then I have one more thing that's related to this.
I was about wrapped up. Go ahead.
Okay. I'm gonna be real. The Mahomes run kind of pissed me off. Like the Niners were
the
so clearly scared.
Or?
Yes, the sideline one, where he faked the out of bounds step out, which led to the defender completely slowing up because they know they can't touch him because they'll get a flag, and because he faked it and like jukes back inside, he ran for like 30 yards as long of his career or whatever. I don't like it. I know it's not the same as the Kenny Pickett fake slide, but the NFL has put such an emphasis on the quarterback is so protected even when they're running outside of the pocket, and if they put a toe on that out of bounds line and you touch them, instant flag, any sort of it, and all that stuff, right? And credit to Mahomes, I'm not blaming him. He is taking advantage of the protection they give him by doing something like that, but I just don't like it because the defenders didn't want to touch him. They clearly did not want to touch him, and it led to such a huge play. And I don't know, just my opinion, I don't like that kind of stuff because I feel like it's gone. That's the moment where I was like, it's gone too far. If the defenders literally are like, we can't do anything, like we can't touch him, and he's able to use that to his advantage to gain 30 yards, I didn't like it.
I do concur, and honestly, it's funny because that's actually not the first time that he's had to play like that. I think it was against Tennessee, the year they won their first Super Bowl back when Tennessee. It was in a playoff game. I don't know if you remember. It was, I think, yeah, he had a very similar play.
I remember that year he ran for like over 50 yards every game.
Yeah, he had a very similar touchdown like towards the end of the half where like Tennessee, the defenders let up, and and so yeah, I think I'm with you. I think I'm with you in that. And honestly, I put the onus on the league because
it's not on Mahomes. He's just taking advantage of it.
Yeah, and because if they had maybe more reviewable penalties, like especially some of those close out of bounds ones, because oftentimes too, let's be honest, especially if it's on the whatever the offense is, the ball carrier's sideline, whoever the guy quote unquote hit, the sideline's always going to freak out and cause a reaction. Even if it was real close, like bang bang. So yeah, I think that's something that the NFL, once again, we've talked about their officiating being poor, and I know we haven't mentioned it much this season, but it's still not been great. Like I was about to get to it, this next game that we'll talk about, but it's just one of those things where you think they'd have a little more consistency and clarity because it feels like it's real tough to be a defender at times, especially in those moments where like in theory you want to make sure he's down and out, but you don't want to tack on an extra 15 yards because you just wanted to push him to make sure that he's out. But it's something that I don't know if they will address or fix, but it sucks in regards to the game because even I will say in regards to the Niners, I saw a couple clips. My boy Sims broke it down, and he was very upset about, and I've been, and it was very rightly so, about like off pass interference, like a lot of defensive pass interference calls where, and this has been the problem for last couple of years where like it's like, man, like the ball's uncatchable, or B, like the quarterback underthrew it, and it was just obviously like the defender actually did a really good job, and and maybe it goes to the offense in terms of the favoring of the ruling where it should be a no call and or maybe offensive pass interference at times. So it's knowing the league, and it won't be as much of an issue in the playoffs. Watching the playoffs, there's going to be one or two that will be they're controversial where, as we always know, playoffs, they tend to swallow their whistles. So it's like, it's just one of those frustrations that we've had for a while. So it's unfortunate that it reared its ugly head, especially in a big game like this. So we'll see. It won't be fixed, but we'll see if anything else like that pops up. Maybe it will if more quarterbacks are able to take advantage of that. But anything else you wanted to mention before we go to the Sunday nighter?
No, that's it. I just don't know how it's tough because they're not going to fix it. I
think the easy fix would be like if it would be reviewable, because I think teams would be like, okay, go for it, because if it's reviewable, because half the time too, it's like I said, it's bang bang. But like obviously, like I said, the sideline reacts. Everyone says, "Oh, look at the flag!" And this poor little quarterback's on the ground, with a defender standing over him half the time. So it's not great terms, look for the defender, even though he's like, dude, like I was making sure he was out of bounds because, like you said, I don't want to allow 30 more yards because I let up, or 15 because I was late. So it's like a weird, like,
the thing
mental
is too,
thing you
though,
have to do.
like the frustrating part, and once again, I'm not blaming Mahomes for this, but it's like Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, like they don't get the same treatment. You know what I mean? Like because they run more and they're also more willing to commit for yardage. You know what I mean? So like. To whereas like a Kyler Murray who is very smart with the slide, so if he all of a sudden takes a hit, it's like, well, what just happened to Kyler? Or like a Mahomes, like it feels like this. Depending on the style of quarterback, the flags almost come out more often too. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
And I don't know how to fix that. Like at Dak's one of those guys too. He doesn't run much anymore, but when he did run, he was going to lower the shoulder. He wasn't getting flags a lot, So.
Yeah, I mean, remember if you just last point we remember the Cam Newton years. That was a big thing. Cam was getting murdered at times in the pocket. Then we see, the whole like weight drop thing on Tom Brady, and it's always a flag, but then Cam would get literally his head taken off, and they're like, oh no, it's Cam, like he's fine. But it's like, no, dude, like you gotta anyway. Yeah, it's we've talked about it before. It's officiating is not great as it should be, especially in that and the rules and such. Because you should be able to review some of these penalties and such. And that's why I'm going to I don't want to go to the Sunday night game because I remember a couple of weeks, it was the last week before, but like the Sky Judge was all sorts of like, remember, I think it's I forget what week, was it the Bills? I forget because remember there's like the Garrett Wilson touchdown. It was a couple weeks ago. Anyway, let's move to the Sunday night game as this one was a tale of two halves. I felt like as the Jets with new Devontae Adams got off to a hot start, we're up, was it like 15-6? And then from there on out, it was Pittsburgh and Russell Wilson's debut as the Steelers end up winning this game at home, 37-15. Now more questions for the Jets as they are further in the hole and at 2-5. But what were your thoughts, at least in regards to the game itself?
Man, I did not see this one coming. I really thought the Jets were going to use this as a springboard game and start elevating, and it did not happen. There was the unfortunate interception where Garrett Wilson, that's on Garrett Wilson, it's not on Rodgers. It hit the guy square in the chest. Sure, you can nitpick a little bit of like he is a little behind him on the chest, like maybe you lead him or something, but like it's on Garrett Wilson. You got to catch that one. But other than that, like I don't know. The Jets offense, it still feels disjointed. I'm still interested to see how they get when Devontae Adams has got more of a integration into the team. He did make a post-game press conference comment where he was like talking about this has kind of been the standard of the team. This is why we're losing. It's like, okay, buddy, you just showed up. Like,
you're not the only one, by the way, with that observation of that quote. I've heard other people be like, yo, like you just got there a week ago.
Yeah, he just got there a week ago, and the way he worded it was very much like, yeah, like this is what's been holding us back. This is why we're losing. It's like, all right, dog, you weren't there for all the other losses. Like, I know you can make the observation, but the way he's wording it makes it sound like he's been here for the struggle, which he was there for the struggle on the Raiders. But anyway,
different struggle.
Yeah, and so like there's that stuff that I want to talk about the offense. Like they couldn't really run the ball well, but Breece Hall had a huge day with the receiving stuff. So there's all that, right? But defensively, man, what happened here with the Jets? Like this was supposed to be the thing that their team was built around was the defense. Najee Harris was able to do whatever he wanted. Jaylen Warren contributed well in the run game. And you want to talk about Russell Wilson in the passing game. Everybody, like I picked up the Jets defense in one of our leagues because I thought like, oh, this is tough. Like we both picked the Jets because we were thinking, why would you swap to Russell Wilson? He had a heck of a day. 264 yards, 2 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, 0 turnovers for the entire Pittsburgh offense. George Pickens finally has a huge day, and George Pickens is probably happy it's Russell Wilson. As much as I love Justin Fields and I wanted the Fields-Pickens thing to work, it felt like they were never quite on the same page, where in this one, Russell Wilson very much became the Patrick Mahomes meme of F it, Tyreek's down there somewhere. That's what George Pickens was. F it, Pickens is down there somewhere. And Pickens was coming up with huge plays like we know he can in some of those contested stuff. He drew a huge pass interference against Sauce Gardner on one drive as well. So he had a heck of a day. And Russell Wilson, I mean, Chris Collinsworth was having a field day in the booth talking about the moon ball, like the thing that Chris Collinsworth does. He was loving it because Russell Wilson was just throwing him up, and it was working. It was working. So the Jets defense, they need to go back to the drawing board because this was a pitiful performance by their own standards, allowing 37 points. Was any of that defensive touchdowns? I don't think so, right?
No.
It was all offensive, which, I mean, sure, they did have the interception, which then resulted in Russell Wilson getting a 1-yard touchdown. So, like, there was that kind of stuff off the Beanie Bishop return to the one. So, like, some of those drives that Pittsburgh had didn't have to be long. And yet, at the same time, when you look at their drive stuff, first opening drive, they drive 42 yards for a field goal. Then they drive 58 yards for a field goal later in the game. Then they drive 54 yards for a touchdown off of interception, which was I believe that was the Garrett Wilson one, where it bounced off his chest.
That one was the second half. I remember because I was going to say something about the first interception because both are to be. The first one was on Rodgers. That was the one where Garrett was behind, actually had beaten Beanie.
And he underthrew it.
And he threw it behind him. He was late and threw a bad ball.
Yeah. Okay. So the second half one. Okay. Which, anyway, that was the one that got returned for the super long one. That one's on Garrett Wilson. But so that was the 1-yard drive for the touchdown. But then, like right after half, 76-yard drive for a field goal. Then after the Jets miss a field goal, then you've got a 75-yard touchdown drive, and then another 75-yard touchdown to follow up that. So it's like the Jets defense just got worn down, and the Steelers had so many long drives, whether it be field goals or touchdowns. And Tomlin was pissed in the first half during the when he ran off the field because he was like, "We're getting long drives and we're settling for field goals." This could have been worse, quite simply. Like if the Steelers weren't settling for those field goals early and were playing like they did in the second half, this could have been a much worse game because the fact that they have three drives where one was for 42, one was for 58, and another was for 76, and those three resulted in field goals. Like, that game could have been so much worse. The Steelers realistically could have put up like 50 or 60 points if they really converted on touchdowns. So, I mean, heck of a game from the Steelers. All the critiques I had of potentially Russell Wilson come in. We'll see what happens for future weeks because it was only one game. But in terms of the offense, they were cooking in this one. And the passing attack certainly looked better than it did with Justin Fields. You did lose, and the one thing I was going to say on the pod, if the second half didn't go the way it was you did lose some of the red zone efficiency with Fields not being there because he was such a threat for running him in the red zone. But in the second half, they managed to figure it out, whether that be Russell throwing that 4-yard touchdown to Van Jefferson or whether it be Najee Harris running it in. So anyway, great game from the Steelers. They're sitting at 5-2, and the Jets on the flip side are 2-5, and they got to start to figure things out because 2-5 is an ugly hole to have to climb back from.
Yes, yeah. So I want to start. You mentioned the defense. Like, I don't want to say, but I think they miss Robert Sala a little bit. I don't know. I'm just saying, since he's been gone, defense. I mean, outside the Broncos, he got fired right before the Bills game after the Vikings loss, right? I think this is week 2 of the.
He got fired after the London game. Who did they play in London?
This is the Vikings. It was Vikings. Okay. So once again, after a one-possession game, which, I mean, like I said, granted the defense let up 23 points the next week. But, yeah, like, I mean, we'll see. In regards to the defense, I will say, too, I feel like they're a little too simple at times. They're just reliant upon, like, this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to do it. Because, like, Sauce Gardner is we know he's very good, but he's not a follow corner. And I feel like, I remember him coming out. I felt like he could be a follow corner. Corner that follows guys around. And they didn't really do that. The Jets, they kind of just played their base, simple defenses and, just gave Pickens and especially Pickens one-on-one opportunities, which, I mean, like you alluded to with, how successful he already is and the fact that Russell Wilson is pretty good at throwing those 50-50 balls and giving his receiver a chance. Like it's that just fed into Pittsburgh's hands in a sense there. And then obviously, able to run the ball too. So maybe needing more beef outside of I almost said Dexter Williams, Quincy, Quinnen Williams. Jeez, because his brother's also on the team, the linebacker.
Yeah,
I always get them confused, and along with Dexter. Anyway, so like maybe need more beef there on defense. I'm not sure the fix is there. I will say, like I was going to say, the 2 interceptions, not great. I mean, first one, like I said, obviously on Rodgers, that one's tough too because it was maybe could have been a touchdown and or at least put you in great field goal position to end the half. Instead, Rodgers late on that throw, slash decision slash bad throw, whatever you want to call it. And, as opposed to closing out the half, maybe going into the halftime 18-6, like you mentioned, Steelers able to, go on a minute drive to score a touchdown, now make it a one possession game. All of a sudden, game on. And then, like you said, unfortunate because then Rodgers actually throws a good ball to Garrett Wilson. And then, Garrett's unable to come up with it and it's a pick. And yeah, it's just behind. And then they're behind the 8 ball. I will say for the Jets offense, I mentioned last week I was impressed by, hey, they did a little more different personnel, different, some motion, and more, running the ball. Not really under center. They did more pistol last week, but still, finding ways to get Breece Hall going in the run game at least, and not just using him as a check down option. I felt like this week they went back to what I didn't like before, which was more Rodgers. He's going to try to shotgun, and he wants to try to pick you apart there with not much motion and such. And yeah, it's granted it's the first week of it. It has potential, especially if you have great weapons like Devontae and Garrett Wilson. Even Lazard was solid for a bit there too. But I think we saw that it's not a great formula, and it's just too reliant upon Rodgers always making the right decision and right throw in the right time. Because I will say, like the line, we've been hard on the Jets offensive line, rightfully so, the past few years. It's been solid. It's been solid the past few weeks. Like especially this week though against the Steelers. TJ Watt did not wreck the game as much as I feared he would be, and you would think that he did considering the score. But no, they actually kind of held TJ Watt in check. They had a good plan there, but. Yeah, just not in love with their passing attack. And I did see a couple of different film breakdowns of, Rodgers maybe predetermining too much still, as opposed to, reacting to the defense. Because there are times, and you mentioned this before, feels like him and Garrett Wilson don't have a great connection. There are times where I saw, my boy, just to re-reference, my boy Sims broke down the game in film. He was like, yeah, there's multiple times where he missed. He didn't look Garrett Wilson's way, and the read should be Garrett Wilson because Garrett Wilson's wide open. And so maybe it's a little bit too much at times trying to get Devontae involved or whatnot, or getting scared of the rush and dumping it off to Breece. And so anyway, they got to figure things out, and like I said, hopefully they go back a little bit more to, like I said, the offense of the previous week. Even though they lost to the Bills, we saw there was a better results where, hey, a little more different run formations, bring in maybe a tight end or two, and then you can use play action to maybe throw some strikes downfield. And yes, you can still do your 3-4 wide, Rodgers, I don't want to call it BS, but his usual kind of offense that he likes to run, sprinkled in with that too. But tough loss for Jets. It just felt like you said, multiple opportunities to get back in this game, and they couldn't with the missed field goals and the one missed field goal and the turnovers. So, and the defense not able to stop Najee Harris apparently, or Jaylen Warren. So great win for the Steelers. They go to 5-2, while the Jets fall to 2-5. And I don't think their schedule gets much easier. Let me double check. They get the Patriots next week, but then Texans and Cardinals, Colts. Maybe that thing go a little bit of run there, but then Seahawks, Dolphins, Jags, Rams, Bills, Dolphins. So who knows? It's not impossible. I want to say. So anyway, big win for the Steelers. Like I said, at home. Let's go to the Monday night games. We had a doubleheader. Let's go with the first one because this one was supposed to be the good one, and it was a pretty good shootout. But some unfortunate news and injuries in this one. But the Ravens, they beat the Bucks 41-31. Like I said, it was looking like an early shootout, but the Ravens kind of grabbed control in the second, third quarter. What were your thoughts here in regards to this one, John?
Great game from the Ravens. They continue to cook. Derrick Henry and Lamar absolutely go crazy. For the Buccaneers, man, we talk about self-inflicted wounds. Some of these other teams like the Raiders, it felt like self-inflicted wounds in this one too. The score is 10-7. Buccaneers are winning. Baltimore has just scored a touchdown. The Buccaneers have now driven 67 yards down the field. They're in the red zone. And I remember looking at it on the Manning cast because I saw the clip pop up. And they're talking about how the Ravens are playing cover 4, and it is completely covered what the Buccaneers play is. The moment the play starts, Peyton Manning is screaming, throw the ball away. Baker throws an interception, trying to force it to Chris Godwin. It is also unfortunate that the drive prior where they had to settle for a field goal that Chris Godwin did score a touchdown that got called back for holding, and it was it's one of those holes where it's like, man, if you didn't have to do that, like Baker would have got the throw off in time before that guy hit him.
I think I remember too. I think it was like it was kind of a ticky tack hole because I remember it was on worse.
It was like
it was. I remember calling it CNT. I was like, is that really a hole? Like maybe held him at the end, but it was whatever.
Baker's rolling to his left. He's actually past Wirfs and the defender. Wirfs gets a little tug on the jersey, but he does let the guy go, and it just seemed like even like the little tug didn't even need to happen because it's tough because Wirfs doesn't know this is happening, right? But Baker's in he's starting the motion of throwing the ball, so like it wouldn't have mattered. The guy wasn't going to get there, so that's the unfortunate part. Is holding does not have the same onus as like a pass interference for the uncatchable ball because it's circumstantial. But he wasn't going to get there, but yet the hold still calls back, so it's a field goal, right? They could have been up 14-0. Regardless, Baltimore drives down. They score touchdowns. 10-7. The cover 4 play happens. Baker forces it. Didn't need to. I believe that was only second down, too, so they had a third down. And they could have even settled for another field goal. He throws the interception. Boom, Baltimore drives down the field. They score a touchdown. They've now taken the lead. Baker throws another interception. Gives them decent field position. Boom, they get a field goal right before half. It's 17-10. This very well could have been a 21-7 game at that point had they not had the hold, had they not had the interception, and who knows what happens the rest of that second quarter, but like self-inflicted wounds, right? Then we come out of the second half, Baltimore gets a field goal, 20-10. Tampa misses a field goal. Oh no, like what are we doing? Then Baltimore just starts going crazy. Touchdown, Buccaneers punt, touchdown, Buccaneers punt. We have life now. It's 34-10. Baltimore fumbles, and Tampa Bay starts turning it on. They score 3 touchdowns in a row, but it was just too little too late. So, Baker with those 2 costly interceptions, that one hold, the missed field goal. Once again, costly mistakes, too little too late on the end of the game. And, Buccaneers lose. I want you to go, and then I want to talk at the end about the Chris Godwin situation.
All right. I do want to say in regards to, like, credit to the Ravens offense, of course, because great balance. Obviously, Lamar throwing 5 touchdowns. I saw a stat where he's already caught up. He's almost caught up to like Brady, and I think he has tied with Manning for amount of games with 5 passing touchdowns. So in his career, and obviously Lamar, as we all assume, still got some more time to do so. So kind of wild. And shout out to those that try to make him wide receiver. Anyway, but yeah, we saw the balance here, even with Henry. I mean, he almost broke off another yard long run. Even if you take that away, he was still extremely efficient on the day. So we're seeing that Baltimore finding ways to marry both the run and then off that, because obviously Rashad Bateman had a huge game. I mean, this was a game, we talk about it sometimes too. Like, it seems like sometimes, unfortunately, with the Baltimore, especially their passing weapons, you mentioned like fantasy for like some of these other teams, like not a great day either for most at times to try to juggle that receiving room of the Ravens, because I mean, it was who would expect Bateman to be the leading guy, and with how Mark Andrews' season's gone, with 2 touchdowns for him. But yeah, kudos to them. But I do want to say for the Bucs, this may be an issue going down the line. Obviously, Todd Bowles very aggressive, likes the blitz, but this is one of the tough things about the Ravens, is especially now that they got both these going, is obviously Lamar's tough to blitz, because obviously if your blitz misses or he finds a seam, it's even more danger. And then on top of that too, we saw a couple times this game where he was just able to pat the ball and maybe move a little bit and throw a strike downfield. Like I think there's that one Bateman touchdown. So yeah, kudos to Lamar and the offense. They're playing at a high level, and we'll see if the Bucs too. Like we mentioned, corner was going to be a concern for them coming into the season, and obviously it was a huge concern yesterday. On top of that, and then just tough that, and we'll talk about the Godwin one in a second. Tough that too. Lose Mike Evans in this game, especially that when he did get hurt, like had a touchdown in his hands, but obviously hurt his hamstring in the middle of that play. And then I don't think they scored after that on that one either. I think that's the one where... Well,
that was the one where they got the Chris Godwin touchdown following the drop, and then it got called back for a hold. So
okay, and that's where they had for the field goal. So instead of putting them in that bind of 14-0, it's only 10-0. And then, like you said, from there it was, like I said, and then even then, they were able to move the ball. And there's that first interception that you mentioned where they're in the red, or close to the red zone at least, or they were in the red zone, and then he throws that.
Actually, correction, the injury, that touchdown came on the interception drive, the next drive. So that's even crazier that That's if Mike Evans unfortunately doesn't go down there. Without the hold, boom, they're up 14-0 with the Chris Godwin tutty. Then Mike Evans scores a second one right there. They don't even have the interception. It's 21-7. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, regardless. So, that's just sometimes that's the way football goes. Is those momentum based things. So, kudos to the Ravens. I'm still concerned about their secondary, as we've seen, especially in this game and early on, like we were alluding to. They were able to get thrown on a bit, and lack of pass rushers too at times. But at the very least, they don't allow the run game to get going. We had complimented how good that Tampa Bay running back room is. And on top of that, too, we've got to throw some love to their offensive line. It's been very good this year. Unfortunately, it's the day where they couldn't get the run game going either. So a lot of it was on the arm of Baker Mayfield, which can be better or for worse, as we saw in this game. But I guess we'll get to that point you were mentioning. Chris Godwin hurt late in the game, unfortunately, and looking like he'll be out for the rest of the season. I think they said it was a broken ankle, right? Ankle injury. Which is tough because he was finally looking like his old self, and even better coming off those. It was like an ACL, right? He had a couple of years ago,
something like that.
Yeah, and then and on top of the fact they already lost Evans earlier that game, and they're already saying he's going to be out for a couple of weeks because hamstrings can be a fickle thing. As a Packer / Christian Watson owner, I know. So, anyways, I'm guessing. Did you want to bring up the situation or what?
Well, before we go on the Godwin thing, because you brought up a couple things I did want to mention. You've said this many times about Todd Bowles, where sometimes he can get a little aggressive. That Justice Hill screen pass right before halftime, it was a pure blitz by Tampa, and what a call by the Ravens offensive staff to read that a blitz call from Bowles, very aggressive, is about to come, and just instantly pivot into a screen that results in a touchdown. So kudos to you, because you've talked about how sometimes Bowles can get a little over aggressive with his blitzing, and it cost him in that one. And the Ravens clearly, knew the same thing was going to happen. So anyway, there's that. Also on the Rashad Bateman thing, I remember last year I saw some chart and I brought it up on the pod that Rashad Bateman, when it came to like getting open and like average separation between him and his matchup, was like elite numbers. But then on the chart, it was like all the way to the right side was like how far you get open. It was like him and Tyreek Hill, I'm pretty sure, were like top two. But then when it came to like yards per play, Tyreek Hill's like top right and Rashad Bateman's bottom right, because he's always open, but he's not getting the ball. I think we're starting to see the Rashad Bateman is, he's starting to cook a little bit. Him and Lamar building chemistry, and the last few weeks it started to blossom. So I love to see that for him, because he definitely has been a receiver that sort of felt like a lot of people have, including us, largely written him off because just didn't really do much ever since they took him in the first round. But he's starting to blossom. So I like to see that from him. And the Ravens could certainly use it, because, we've seen Zay Flowers can certainly have big weeks. Mark Andrews historically has been really good, but this season hasn't done much. Isaiah Likely blossoming. So now maybe if Rashad Bateman can too, maybe you've got a little bit of a Packers situation on your hands where you don't know, outside of Lamar and Derrick Henry, you don't know who the guy can be that's going to kill you in the receiving game. So I like to see that for him. Anyway, on the Chris Godwin thing, let's talk about the situation, because I don't know your thoughts on it, but I'm very much so a believer that this was... I don't think the starter should have been in on the game. They take over with 1:34 left. You have no timeouts, and you're down by 10. I know it's doable. But at the situation in which Godwin got hurt at that point too, you had burned 3 plays in a row, and you're at 43 seconds on the clock. Once again, no timeouts, 43 seconds on the clock. You're in your own side of the field. And Chris Godwin, unfortunately, dislocates his ankle. I don't know all the details of all that stuff, but apparently when you dislocate your ankle, the only way you dislocate it means that something is torn. I don't know the specifics on the injury, but I know he's out for the year now. His contract expires at the end of the season, so this could be the end of his time with Tampa Bay. And I don't know. I just think the situation, once again, even like... It's 3rd and 17. He did get the first down, so credit to Chris Godwin for that. But 3rd and 17, you're in your own side of the field. You have no timeouts with 1 minute left on the clock. I'm all for like going for the win, man, but that was just tough to see, that scenario. I'm conflicted because like I understand why they are going for the win, But even then, you need a touchdown. You have to recover an onside kick, and then you have to score again. Once again, no timeouts. I don't know. It just it's tough. Part of me really wishes that I don't know. I don't know because I also have Chris Godwin in a fantasy league, so that sucks for me. Invested. So I'm a little more invested, but it just really sucks for Godwin because the clip of him the moment he's on that cart and he's sitting there talking to like the trainer and he's like, back to work, and his face was so disappointed, and I just feel for the guy because I wonder in his mind if if that happened to me. I'm just looking at the scenario. It felt like the game was lost, quite frankly. The fact that they have no timeouts and they have to recover an onside kick, I don't know, man. I feel like it's tough. It's tough.
Yeah. So I feel like there's no right answer. But let me play a little bit of devil's advocate because my initial thought wasn't really like, because it was tough. Because let's just start with the fact that, and I won't say I'm playing devil's advocate here because I think you're right for the most part.
But I will say, too, you're fair because my initial thought was not the fact of why are the starters on the field because they had literally just scored 3 touchdowns in a row. So, I understand why they're going for the win. It's just tough, the result that happened when, like I said, it's just tough.
Yeah. I will say, in one thing, maybe obviously Bowles being a little bit aggressive / believing in his guys a bit too much because they did get the onside kick before.
Sure.
So maybe they were like, okay, maybe we can strike quick here and then, or, strike here and then you just have a chance. And obviously we have, to be once again, playing devil's advocate, we have seen Baltimore that there's that stat earlier in the year where they've blown a couple of leads. So maybe that, is coming prevalent. And then in regards to the situation too, like that third down was off a sack with the play before. So it's not like, they had time to huddle and then maybe say, it's 3rd and 17 with a minute draining, take out Godwin. Obviously he was into the play, at least the play before. So, just unfortunate. I didn't even know about the contract situation either. So that's interesting as well, and very saddening as too. And I didn't even know about that detail you mentioned about back to work because it reminds me, not that his career has been like this, but things like that remind me a little bit of like when Andrew Luck called it quits. And I remember it was a couple of years ago, obviously a couple of years removed, when he kind of had, I guess, interview or whatever story with a reporter. He mentioned that he was just tired of rehabbing most of his career, rehabbing injuries and stuff. So, and obviously this is, like you said, and obviously Godwin knows, is just right back on that horse. And at some point, it's like, I can only imagine that there's a little bit, there may be some frustration there. And it'll be interesting to see, like you're alluding to, maybe does this lead to him maybe going elsewhere, and this may also affect his bottom line in terms of what kind of contract he gets too, because obviously not a big receiver, and we know that these more slot inside guys, sometimes their value diminishes over time just because of the physicality of the league, and it doesn't help that teams will look at his medical history, be like, man, all that, and then you just got hurt this year, and you're so it'll be interesting to see what happens, because remember too, he almost left a couple years ago. Maybe he wasn't going to leave, but they had to franchise tag him and do all that, or get an extension. So,
and I wanted to bring it up too because shout out to Brandon Ayuk for getting his money, because obviously his season also ended this past week, and it's one of those situations where this is why I never blame players for holding out. And Ayuk, obviously, he got his deal done, and it was a contract that had been offered to him a lot earlier after the reports all came out that was the Niners' offer on the table for a long time, and he just got it. But it's like, this is why I don't blame guys for doing what they got to do to get their money, because imagine Ayuk didn't take the offer, plays the season out, bets on himself. It happened to Dak, which Dak luckily got the contract because he was literally having a insane season. Their defense was horrible that year, but Dak got the contract. Imagine Ayuk does it. That thing can come up in negotiations and hurt you. And now I'm sitting here wondering, does it hurt Chris Godwin? He's 27. He's going into his year 28. Wide receiver prime, doesn't have that much left on it at this point. You get into your early 30s. That's kind of the end of it. So he's got his next contract is kind of it. And for the big money. And now this injury is kind of looming over it. And he was having a heck of a year too. I feel bad for the guy. Especially like you said, talking about Andrew Luck and rehabbing injuries. That's what that clip of Godwin looked like. If you could see the look on his face, man, he looked so bummed, and it very much looked like back to rehab. And he was just so disappointed. So, yeah, it's unfortunate, but that's football.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see. Hey, when we talk, I don't think they'll trade him to a division rival. I don't mean to go on a different note, but like obviously maybe the Bucks, would they have to make a move for Deontay Johnson, try to fill him into that role, and then hang on while and hopefully get Mike Evans back because like we said, this is a solid team overall. I mean, like we said, they almost hang tough with the Ravens outside of a couple plays, literally, which I know is basically football, but especially in this game. I mean, we know that the Bucks are kind of on that second tier. I would say, of like really good teams, probably a playoff team that maybe could make noise, but now tougher to do so without at least definitely one of your main two receivers. So we'll see if the rest of the team per se can pick up the slack, especially on defense. Like I mentioned, like they're gonna have to get back on that. And granted, once again, they played the Ravens. Ravens are really awesome, so it's not like ring the doorbell, ring the alarms to their defense. But to be fair, they've allowed like a lot of points the past three games. 36 to the Falcons 2 weeks ago, 27 to the Saints the week before, and I know they blew them out, but still, and then 41 to Baltimore. I'm in the wrong score. 41 to Baltimore this week. We'll see how they bounce back, if they make any moves or what they do to bolster that wide receiver room now that Godwin is gone for the season and Mike Evans, I think they set out for probably at least a couple of weeks. I don't think it's like week 11, I think was our targeted return, something like that. So tough sledding, very tough game overall for the Buccaneers and Buccaneers fans. But let's go to the last game real quick. I don't see anything else to mention on Bucks Ravens.
That's it.
All right, last game, maybe least. Cardinals win over the Chargers 17-15. Chargers even the Cardinals a little bit recently, but kind of living in the muck, oddly enough. And these are two teams that usually haven't been, so it's very interesting to see that they are. And nonetheless, not a very high flying offensive game, especially number wise, for these two teams. Cardinals get the win at the end. What were your thoughts here in regards to big home win for Arizona?
Good win by the Cardinals. Definitely didn't feel like this was going to be a game that they were going to come out and win. James Conner was a man possessed. He was bulldozing throughout the day. I've said it many times. I'm going to say it again. Kyler Murray needs to keep running because 6 carries, 64 yards, had that 44-yard rushing touchdown. He's got to keep running because although this offense has improved, let's remember, this is still the same team from last year that was pitiful, that couldn't really do much on offense outside of throwing it to Trey McBride. And so sometimes you need a spark, and Kyler Murray running can obviously be that spark because this game, the passing game, was not working much. So I had to throw that out there. For Marvin Harrison Jr., I need to see them try to get him more involved. I also need Kyler to be better because there was a route, which, these are tough because I didn't see the full, like, all 22 angle here, but there was a route where Marvin did a double move and absolutely cooked the defense. There was nobody over the top. This is a walk-in over-the-top touchdown if Kyler throws it, and then Marvin looks back. The ball's not coming his way. He throws his hands up like he's a little upset. Then there was also a play that got shown on the broadcast where they're throwing they put him in the slot. It's a one-on-one as LA's blitzing, and Kyler doesn't throw it to him. Instead, he throws it on like a pick play to James Conner, which gets broken up. All that, I'm just sitting here like, man, it feels like Kyler can be a little bit better to getting into Marvin, and then obviously they can draw up a few more plays to just like quickly get Marvin the ball where it's like Kyler, he's the read. So yeah, I don't know that because Marvin has shown he can be the explosive guy who can make incredible plays, but it doesn't feel like a lot of times, whether it be Kyler or the play calling, that they're allowing him to be said guy. So I think they should clean that up. Those are the notes I have on the Cardinals. They won the game. Very impressive result from their defense, too, because they did not allow the Chargers to run all over them, which I worried was going to happen. On the Chargers side, this is why I argue wins are not a QB stat, man. Justin Herbert, in my opinion, played basically a perfect game. He played a perfect game. Like, he threw for 350 yards. He was incredibly efficient when it comes to the completion percentage. And yet, and this is with basically no real weapon stepping up outside of Will Dissly. They're not running the ball well. They ran 22 times for 59 yards, so 2.7 yards a carry. So they can't run. And Herbert throws that absolute dime to Jalen Reagor for 41 yards. Jalen Reagor then fumbles the ball out of bounds. So maybe you're hoping. Sorry, what did you say?
I was saying into the end zones because of the touchback rule, by the way, too.
Yeah, so that's actually key because not only was it out of bounds, it was into the end zone out of bounds, so it's a turnover. So it's like Herbert played a perfect game. Like I get that like he didn't throw any touchdowns, but watching that game, I was very invested in this one as I had both Kyler, Herbert, and James Conner all going in various fantasy leagues. It felt like every time they got to the red zone too, they just don't have like that guy. They were missing Quentin Johnson. It felt like, which is crazy to say, but they were missing Quentin Johnson because he's been the red zone threat for them, and they didn't have that guy where they could punch it in. And Herbert was refusing to force it, which I think was good because it was a close, tight game, and you don't want to throw an interception. Just take your field goals. It's just unfortunate, and he. That's the thing. He took the lead too. He led an 8-minute drive, which resulted in them taking the lead with the field goal. It's just unfortunately the Cardinals were able to take the lead back with the 2 minutes they had left on the clock. So, yeah, I don't know. This is why I argue wins are not a QB stat because, simply put, Herbert played a hell of a game, and it's just unfortunate that the Chargers just don't have enough weapons. The run game wasn't good enough in this one, and Quentin Johnson, he'll come back at some point. He'll be helpful. But if I'm the Chargers, you're 3-3. You started off the season really well. Let me look up their schedule because I don't know how the schedule looks.
I can tell you it. So next week is Saints. I think we expect that to be a win. Next week is the week after is at Browns, so winnable. That I would say. Then Titans at home, LA, so that should be winnable. And then you do have the Bengals, but that's at home. And then Ravens.
The Bengals are 2. They're 3-4. So like still 2-4 as of right now, if they were to play today, winnable game either way.
And then after that, Ravens. So hey, that could be okay. That's maybe advantage Ravens, and then Falcons. Yeah. This is where it gets tough. Ravens, Falcons, at Chiefs versus Bucks. And then I'll even throw in versus Broncos because that's in December. So who knows? And then Patriots, Raiders to end the season. But that 5-week stretch is tough. In December.
That is a very tough stretch, but I'm looking at the schedule right here.
But
like you said, next 3 games, I feel all very winnable. I think Chargers should win those games on paper. Should, but it's the NFL, you never know. Bengals is a toss-up. I would say Broncos is a toss-up. Falcons, I think, is a toss-up. Ravens, Chiefs, Buccaneers. Buccaneers, even actually with some of the injuries, Mike Evans should be back by that point, but who knows? There could be a toss-up at that point of the year because, like we talked about, their secondary, there's stuff there. Patriots, Raiders should be wins. So, I mean, there's like 5 should be wins, a handful of toss-ups, and then like I'd say like the Chiefs Ravens games, Chiefs Ravens should win those. But the schedule's doable, right? So I'm sitting here thinking the Rams are making Cooper Kupp available for trade. The guy doesn't even have to move cities. I think the Chargers should be going and trying to get Cooper Kupp. Imagine a guy like Ladd McConkey getting to learn from a guy like Cooper Kupp, having both of those guys on the field at the same time. McConkey has experience playing on the outside at Georgia, so it's not like Cooper Kupp coming in takes away playing time. You could put McConkey, you could put Josh Palmer, you could put Quentin Johnson all on the outside there. You've got a reliable Keenan Allen replacement now in Cooper Kupp. I think the Chargers are in the mix for a playoff spot. And if I'm them, I'm calling for some receiver because I think they could use some help, and I really do think this team could be a playoff team. So I don't know the price tag. That's the tough part. You got to negotiate. I think they're saying they want a second-round pick. And if you're the Chargers, with the way that Jim Harbaugh has the envisioned team, maybe he's not willing to part for that price for a veteran receiver. And I get it, but I don't know. I feel like the Chargers. I really feel like if they honestly, if they just still had Keenan Allen and he was healthy, because he hasn't been healthy for the Bears, but assuming they had a healthy Keenan Allen, it'd be cooking. So yeah.
Just on that. Well, I do agree that would be great. I do think at the end of the day, unfortunately, Harbaugh's so old school. He's just be like, no, we're going with the guys we're going with, and especially since they're so run heavy, I think. But we'll see. Like I do concur. Like maybe though, if we're in the same school of thought, we talked about Deontay Johnson earlier. Hey, maybe you'll get him for a bit cheaper. I don't know if something like that instead of having I did think of the Kupp thing too. That is a very good.
Just imagine
that would be great. Giving a Herbert, basically, because we saw with Keenan Allen was pretty good. And no offense to Keenan, but I think granted Kupp had injuries recently, so who knows? But for the most part, I think Kupp's of that level, or I would say maybe even better at this point, maybe in his career, especially the recent Keenan Allen years. But it'd be interesting to see if they make moves because they could easily kind of put themselves in position to make a run, like we kind of mentioned. But I will say too, I'll give them kudos at least for trying to be patient with the run, although it didn't work very well, like you said. And obviously, just missed opportunities. You mentioned the Rieger fumble, and then they even had that one pick at the beginning of the game. And I'm not going to be too harsh on the defensive lineman, Tart. Yeah, but then he gets stripped while trying to return the fumble, and then Arizona recovers it. So it's like, okay, never. I know it happened in the stat book, but in a sense, didn't really, they really get a fresh set of downs, the Cardinals. So that was a little bit, I don't know if you would call it tough / unlucky / I don't know. I would maybe more tough and unlucky, because once again, how often are these D linemen going to get their hands on an interception? I'm sure he's one of those situations where I got the ball, I don't know what to do, or he knows what he's trying to run. But yeah, kudos to the Cardinals. They staying patient with the run seemed. I will say it seems like, for better or for worse, it seems like they're kind of adopting that style, and I think it's also because Gannon's a defensive head coach, and most of these defensive head coaches, we want to run the ball and play through complementary football and just limit the whatever. And I'm sure he wants to help out his young defense, because we've mentioned they don't have great pieces there. So yeah, kudos to them for slowing down the Chargers' run game. I think they realized that let's just make like we're alluding to, let's make the Will Disleys and Joshua Palmers beat us today, and unfortunately they couldn't in that sense. And yeah, hopefully they can get more consistency in the out of Marvin Harrison Jr., since they've invested very high draft pick on him, and I'm sure that'll come to. Important to remember too, like Kyler, once we talked about it. Yeah, I know he played a bit, but last year still was coming off that ACL. We saw this year, okay, now he's seeming to be back, like you're mentioning, with him busting off these big runs. So it just seems like it may come with time. Like they got the run game going. It's been inconsistent, but this week they did. So, and to be fair, Chargers have been a pretty good defense too this year. So yeah, and unfortunately that Kyler missed that one opportunity that you mentioned. But yeah, we'll see what happens. And tough that Michael Wilson, I thought he would be taking the reins more per chance, to basically be the third option. But yeah, that really hasn't come to fruition as much. But we'll see. Just tough to expect James Conner to be your leading rusher and receiver. I don't think you're going to win many games doing that. They did this week. Kudos to them. But we'll see. I doubt it's repeatable. But anything else you want to throw in or mention for this game or this week?
That's going to be it.
Alrighty, so yeah, a little bit of a long-winded one, but we had literally 15 games to go over, and yeah, 2 trades, or a trade. Obviously, you mentioned the Hopkins one and such. So yeah, if that's all for both of us, that's gonna do it. Those are all the Week 7 games, our thoughts, reactions, etc. Obviously, we'll be back whenever this comes out tomorrow, Thursday, to share our picks / bets for Week 8. As like I mentioned at the top of the podcast, John has got a bit of a lead in both categories, so we'll see if I can catch up, or if he'll continue to build off that and start quote unquote making money in a sense, even though once again we're not really betting, but hey, you're in the greens so far, and both, and almost in the greens in regards to the record. You're just one game off from being there, so we'll see how that pans out. And I will say, sorry, I'll mention it next time, but yeah, the 5-0 difference discrepancy doesn't help. But otherwise, that'll do it for John and myself. Like I said, we'll be back tomorrow with our picks. Until then, we'll see you all next time. Adios.